Pardon the delay, but we are now calling to order this meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority on Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. Can we have a roll call and determination of a quorum, please?
Chairperson Golden.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Pulitz. Present. Treasurer Rogers.
Here.
Member Jones. Member Hamilton.
Here.
Member Hutter. Member Norvell.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Fantastic. John Rogers, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, approval of the minutes of the past meetings of the Airport Authority. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those minutes? And do we have a motion to approve and finalize what we have before us?
I move to approve the minutes as published.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as published. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Modification of the agenda. The Airport Authority Chair reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process the agenda, and items may be taken out of order, combined for consideration, or pulled or removed from the agenda at any time. I'm exercising that privilege this evening after reviewing the agenda and having discussions with our legal counsel, and also noting that we have a petitioner in the audience tonight that I don't want to have to keep waiting all evening for the last item on the agenda. We're going to be moving item number 5 on the agenda to item number, well, right after item number 2. So if everyone wants to take note of that, item number 5 will be heard after agenda item number 2. That way we're not keeping people waiting who are here for that agenda item. Okay? So, now that we've moved on with that, public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority on any agendized or non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person per topic. And if there's anyone here that would like to provide public comment, please approach us, introduce yourselves, state your name, and let us have your comment. Anybody? No? Okay. Fair enough. I see no public comment then. We'll move on to item number F1, consent agenda for discussion and possible action here. Has everyone had a chance to review the revisions of the approval of the snow removal plan? I know I have. Is everyone okay with it?
Yes.
Okay. Could we have a motion and a second to approve that revised snow removal plan?
So moved.
Okay, Carl, thank you for your motion, and John for your second. All in favor of approving the revision to the snow removal plan, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that matter carries. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move on to public hearings. Should be a very entertaining meeting, I think, this evening. For discussion and possible action, approval of the annual audit report for the Airport Authority.
Weren't you going to do the other one first?
No. We're sticking with this.
Okay, good.
You'll see what we're doing.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'll fill you in again. So, John, this is yours to give us presentation.
All right, so I'm counting on the fact that you guys all read the 300, oh, wait a minute, not 300 page, the audit report. The audit, we've completed our audit. The audit was made more challenging this year because of the change in management at the airport. It was also, I made it more challenging because when I started doing the day-to-day management of bookkeeping, I tried to move a bunch of it online, and historically it was 100% paper-based system. And then we also had our auditor change. And on top of that, the auditing standards for public entities changed. So it was a really interesting process, daunting, a lot of paper changed hands, but the audit was completed, and the audit findings in the most broad summary are that there were no material misstatements on any of our reports. But there were 6 findings that related to control, and some of those were related to the changes that I made and to the management change. Some of them were just related to having a new pair of eyes looking at how we run our operation. And so on those 6 findings, we are required to do a corrective action plan that was authored by our manager, Corey, and I'm going to let him speak to the corrective action plan.
Okay, so there were 6 items on the corrective action plan, but we can summarize those with identifying 4 problems that were found and 4 solutions. So there were some errors that were corrected as a part of the audit, and the solution to that is to fully utilize the Intuit software tools that we have available to us. And also to utilize SharePoint to collaborate with our CPA more effectively. I think by fully utilizing these tools that we have available to us, we're going to be able to prevent these errors and also have redundancy in place. The next problem would be with the grant expenditures. There were some errors with the grant expenditures not being recorded properly. Bullis and Company has already developed a solution for that. What they're going to be doing is monitoring both credits and debits of grants in order to have a balanced account. So if there's for any reason that the account is not zeroed out, it will demonstrate that there's an error, and we'll be able to correct that error before it's a problem. The next thing was a physical inventory of equipment purchased with federal funds. That hasn't been done in over 2 years. So what we've done is I've worked with Rick, our airport operations and maintenance technician, to implement a inspection every 2 years that will be reviewed. And finally, there were 2 issues with documents from our engineering consultant. They were preparing these documents and submitting these documents without the sponsor's approval. So I've communicated with Armstrong to ensure that all those documents go through the airport manager's office so the sponsor has an opportunity to review all that documentation. And all of these things have already been implemented and being utilized today. And that's all I have.
So what we're looking for from the authority tonight is an approval of the audit report so that it can be submitted to the state. We are a state agency, and so we're required to have an approved audit report submitted once a year.
Before the motion, I'd like to just to point out that I was involved in a lot of what John and Corey went through, and I have to say, the airport authority is held to the same standard as all other Nevada government entities. We're under $1 million a year budget company or operation, and we're dealing with people that do, $50, $100, $200 million. That being said, that's just a part-time responsibility for our staff. One of the many things that our staff does, as opposed to a lot of larger parts of the state or of government agencies where they have complete departments doing what we did with just part-time effort. So I applaud John and Corey for addressing all these issues, for being forthright, being arduous in gathering the data. It was not easy. The result, I thought, was completely satisfactory, that they found us to be, basically in compliance with need for improvement, which is, as John said, it was unavoidable at this point. So congratulations. And if you'd like, I'll go ahead and also move that we accept the audit report as published.
Okay, we have a
Second.
Thanks, Arlo. Jumped right on it. Got a motion and a second to accept the audit report. Any questions from members of the authority? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's see here. I think we're on to agenda item number 2, at which point I have a conflict of interest in this matter. Direct. Vice Chair Pulitz will be overseeing this for me, and I am going to be dismissing myself. Let me know when you're done.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Yes, since this has to do with Michael's lease property, he was being appropriate and finding himself to avoid any conflict of interest. So with that, this is the discussion and possible action to modification of the Mountain West Aviation LLC lease recorded September 5th, 2008, as document number 382384 for lot line adjustment to correct the legal description to the area actually constructed by the authority when the lease was cited, adjustment of rent and refund overpayment. So with that, Council Takis would be our staff report.
Yeah, so this item was, I mentioned it in my legal report at our last meeting, our meeting in November. When we did the survey of the area east of Bravo, taxiway Bravo, we discovered that the lot lines didn't match up as between what was constructed at the fuel island, which is owned by Mountain West Aviation, and what was in the lease that we had created for the fuel island. Just to give you a little bit of history, the fuel island used to be on the other side of taxiway Bravo. It used to be kind of in a corner between the runway and taxiway Bravo. When we realigned the runway, we had to move the fuel island. And so we included in our FAA AIP grant the expenses of moving the fuel island, which we did. Our airport engineers designed a lot directly across taxiway Bravo to place the fuel island, and our airport engineers actually designed the new fuel island because it was our obligation as the relocation. Unfortunately, the area they initially described for the fuel island was not a parallelogram, but it was kind of an odd shape where two of the sides were not parallel to each other. One was squared off and the other one was at an angle. And then what they built was actually something that looks like a perfect parallelogram with both sides are being parallel. And no one really went back to look to see if what they had originally described was what they built. We assumed that the engineers who had originally given us the description were following that description, and frankly, none of us went back to it. Now, part of the problem was the lease to identify the area was almost 2 years before we actually did the construction. So I think something might have been lost during that time frame. But the short version is the legal description for the fuel island doesn't match up with what is really vacant out there in taxiway Bravo, which is one of our later items. And so to clean it up, our recommendation is that we amend that legal description to that lease to match what's really there. And if we do that, it results in a reduction of the lease area of 1,417 square feet, and it makes that area essentially available for lease as part of the Bravo parcel. In addition, we've been overcharging the tenant. The amount is fairly nominal. I think I put it in my briefing memo, and I think it's about $500, $520, something like that, that Mountain West Aviation is entitled to as a refund. I approached Mountain West Aviation and that would be Michael Golden, the chairman, in his capacity as a tenant, not as chairman of the Airport Authority, outlined this to him, and he was agreeable to it. And so what we're asking for you to do today is approve the change to that legal description. Now, once we record the survey, then we will have an actual parcel identified, and at that point, we can actually do a formal amendment to the lease. But from the standpoint of cleaning this up now so that we can go forward with the lease of the rest of the Bravo parcel, it makes sense for you guys to vote now to approve that change in legal description and the corresponding change to the rent. His monthly rent will go down by whatever 6 cents times 1,417 square feet. That's 6 cents per year. So Again, these are nominal amounts of money. We're talking about hundreds, not thousands of dollars. And so I'm available to answer any questions. I provided in the briefing packet some maps or some charts, one of which is actually the survey map that was done by the surveyors and the legal description that they've generated. The other one was the exhibit that Atkins Engineering, when they first gave us the information to change the lease parcel that they gave us, and you can see the two don't match up. And so I'm here to answer any questions, but my recommendation is that you vote to approve the change, and yeah, that's it, really. That you vote to approve the change in the legal description.
Thank you, Steve. Any comments? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Mr. Vice Chairman, I move to approve the corrected legal description and change to rent between the Carson City Airport Authority and Mountain West Aviation LLC, as well as authorize the Airport Authority to reimburse Mountain West Aviation LLC for the overpayment on 1,417 square feet, approximately $552.63.
Is there a second? Stan seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Thanks a lot. Okay, we are now moving on to, again, agenda item 5. This is for discussion and possible action regarding the approval of change of ownership of Gonai Aviation from Mr. Hartman and Clary to Kevin Updegrove, approval of current rent of Gonai Aviation lease or action needed for current market rent, consideration of issue raised by tenant as to offset due to drainage actions taken by the city. So, I'm going to turn this over to our legal counsel for the staff summary, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
So as the chairman mentioned, there's 3 items here. One is the approval of the change of control. The former lease, or the lease that's in effect, says that if there's over a 25% change in ownership, that change needs to come before the authority. I don't think this is a big deal, really, but it is important that it be cleaned up. And so Mr. Updegrove has bought out the 25% interest of Mr. Hartman and the 25% interest of George Clary. As a result, he's now a 50% owner. And so that first item, we're asking for your approval to approve that change in ownership. The second item involves the, and I don't know if you want to take these one at a time. I don't know. What's your pleasure, Mr. Chairman? Okay. Okay, yeah, and that one I think is relatively straightforward and simple. And by the way, Mr. Updegrove's resume is included in the package, just the way Mr. Hartman and Mr. Clary's backgrounds were included when we originally approved that transfer of that lease. The second item is approval of the current rent on the lease. Cubics prepaid the lease for about a 15-year period. They did it in part because we were cash poor at the time, and they did it in part because it made sense for them to pay it off from their standpoint. And so we calculated the net present value when we accepted that rent from them. That provision in the lease said that beginning in 2021, rent goes back into play because that was the end of the 15-year prepayment. And so the lease says that the rent is to be set at the then current market rate for the remainder of the lease. And so that issue before you is to set that rental rate. There's basically, to me, there's basically two somewhat obvious options. There may be other ones, but one is the most recent appraisal that we've gotten for airport property is 28 cents a square foot. And I think you could safely rely on that. What we're keying on here, an important distinction here, is we're keying on the language of the lease as to what happens. We're not keying on a statute. If it were a statute, all the statutes talk about doing an appraisal. Now, the other option is you could do an appraisal and find out what the rate is. And if you go the appraisal route, my suggestion would be that you, because it'll probably take you maybe 60 days at least to get an appraisal, maybe more, I don't know. My recommendation would be you institute, an interim rate like the 28 cents until you get the appraisal and then true it up. If the appraisal comes in lower, you give the tenant a credit. If the appraisal comes in higher, you collect that additional amount. So I see that as kind of the two options there. And then the third item is an issue that's been raised by the tenant. The city had built a drainage channel on the kind of the backside of their lease. And I did not plot the leasehold, but Mr. Lewis is here, and I'm sure he can enlighten us as to where the boundaries of the leasehold are. But the argument that's being raised by Mr. Lewis on behalf of Gonai Aviation is that he's being denied the use of a portion of his parcel, and so he should be getting some kind of rent consideration for that. And on that, I don't have much input, but obviously your options there are you either decide that that argument has merit and you do something about it, you grant him some kind of rent abatement or some reduction or something, or you decide that it's not appropriate. I did put in my briefing memo that apparently this work was done before Gonai Aviation took the assignment of the lease. And in a past life, I was counsel for Cubics on a great many things. And coincidentally, Mr. Lewis was their chief pilot and also one of their head salespeople. But I know that when they first took that lease, a really important thing to Cubics was having an area where they could test radio frequency on their computer equipment that they were constructing, they were designing and building. And so that spot turns out to be a perfect place to lay a metal grid so that you can measure the radio frequency emissions of the equipment. And so if you go out there and look out there, there's a paved square out there with what looks kind of like rebar crisscrossed across it, although it's slightly lighter and it's not rebar, it's not iron. It's designed to measure or to attenuate so you can measure radio frequency. That was a really important consideration to him. And I think that if I understand Mr. Lewis's pitch, he'd like to pave that area and the area behind it for tie-down area. And paving his leasehold for tie-down area is certainly permitted under the lease and makes sense. The only question is how much of an interference this ditch is and whether it's the airport's responsibility. But I'll leave that because I want Mr. Lewis to make his presentation because there are probably things I don't know about that as well. So those are the three items. And so I think I would recommend you take them one at a time. And so I would recommend that you first consider the change of ownership. Obviously, if you have any questions, you let us know, or if there are questions, you can always let representatives from Gonai Aviation respond as well.
Okay, I'm on board with that because we do have three distinct matters before us. So let me make a recommendation before we get into any discussion on this. The transfer of percentage ownership from parties is pretty clear-cut, pretty straightforward. We know Kevin pretty well. He's a good guy. I see no reason why we just don't approve that. It should have been done at the time that the ownership transferred, but it's before us now. The applicants come to us after the fact, begging for forgiveness. They're good people. I would suggest that we have a motion to approve the change of ownership first, then we can dig into the other 2 issues.
Okay, I move to approve the change in ownership of this lease, or sorry, approve the change in ownership of Gonai Aviation of Kevin Updegrove replacing Bill Hartman and George Clary.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Oh. I'll take either one of you guys. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the ownership change of Gonai Aviation membership from George Clary and Bill Hartman to Kevin Updegrove. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that carries. So the ownership matter is behind us. Now, let's address the lease rent provision. That's a pretty clear-cut issue. I'm all about leases. I really am. That's all I've ever done. Fair market value is fair market value. I'd like to hear from members of the airport authority on this, and maybe the applicant would like to weigh in on this matter too. I don't know. We'll certainly give the applicant that opportunity.
I'd like to go first, if you don't mind.
Oh, please, go ahead, Tim.
I have to disclose that I know Kevin Updegrove and I know Steve Lewis, but to be in full disclosure, I'm a very close friend of Steve Lewis. We're partners in airplanes, and I find him to be a mentor of mine, and I want to know if it's appropriate. Should I recuse myself on this? I have no financial gain in this. I just want to disclose that I have a personal relationship, so I don't know what the guidance of the board is. Any comment on that?
Maybe I could respond. The standard is to disclose any potential conflicts or the appearance of a conflict, and then you need to make a decision as to whether or not it would affect your vote on the matter or whether it would be perceived by the public as having affected your vote. And if
Okay.
you believe it would, then you are obligated to abstain.
Right.
If you believe it wouldn't, then you're
No. Okay. That being said, I feel I can make my decision fully impartial and just go with the facts that I see them. So I'll stay on. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
So I think it would be appropriate to begin the discussion here to hear from the applicant if you have any comments on the issue of the rent escalation that is to take place retroactive to January 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Steve Lewis. I'm the owner of Sterling Air Limited, a longtime FBO here at Carson City, and also a 50% owner in Gonai Aviation. Just a brief explanation as to what brought us here with Kevin. We knew when he purchased from one partner, it was 25%. It was under the threshold. Unfortunately, one of our other partners died suddenly, and our operating agreement basically gave the owners first right of refusal, and Kevin elected to accept that other 25%. So it wasn't like we were trying to skip out. It really happened actually quite fast through Mr. Clary's estate. So thank you for getting that cleared up. With respect to a comment made by Steve Takis, the rent was paid through the year 2021, and the new rate begins on January 1, 2022. In a measure of good faith, Gonai Aviation has already paid for January. We just simply went with the 20 cents that was there because we wanted to make sure that we were paying our fair share at a good time, knowing that it was going to come before this board to then determine what the current or going rate is. In my opinion, the way I read the lease is there were multiple increases with Cubics Corporation. I was just becoming, as a board member back in 2008, I think, when this was negotiated. And like Steve Takis said, the airport was kind of strapped for cash. And we had a lot of things coming up, and we needed additional funds to meet the federal match. And this was a way to think outside the box. The rate, I believe, with cubics was somewhere around 3.3 cents a square foot back in 1988. When they came and renegotiated for a 30-year extension, the first 5 years was at that rate or whatever the CPI rate was, and then they added a couple of CPI increases for the first 5 years every other year, as it's written in most all leases on the airport. The next 5 years were at 16 cents, and then the final 5 years that brought us through December 31, 2021 was at 20 cents. We would propose that we start at 20 cents and add a CPI clause this year, January 1, 2022, and then subsequent years, every 2 years, adding the CPI clause. I know that the appraised rate, the last appraisal, it came in at 28 cents. And I believe that if somebody came before you requesting a 50-year lease, that's in fact what you would probably write it at, is at 28 cents for a full 50 years. This is an existing lease. It's been around for some time. So our argument would be that we pick up where we left off, 20 cents, add the CPI, and move forward. So that is our position as Gonai Aviation. Kevin, anything else?
Just wanted to introduce myself. For those of you that I don't know, I am Kevin Updegrove, and thank you for the approval tonight. And, you know, as mentioned before, just I'll say an apology. It wasn't really known, or I didn't look at the lease in details about the change in ownership until Steve pointed it out in about November. So anyhow, thank you for that. And yes, I'm in agreement with Steve. We've discussed this, and I think it, to me, makes some logical sense to move from the 20 and an increase as opposed to starting from a new lease. And so anyhow, we're in alignment on that.
Question, what is the CPI? What would that 20 cents plus, what is that? What is that amount?
Well, when I asked that very question to Corey, airport manager, and I believe, Corey, you told me it was something in the 8.5% range as the going rate. But, you know, we all know we're in extreme inflationary times right now. So what we used to consider as 3 to 4%, I think is now 8 plus.
CPI was 8.1% for all the other leases that had a CPI increase this year.
Let me just weigh in on that just for a minute, just to make sure that's clear. All the CPI clauses in the leases are 2-year increases in CPI. So the rate that the airport manager is referring to is the 2-year rate for the CPI increase. But one thing, if I could ask a question of the applicant, the rate for the last 3 years or last 5 years were calculated as 20% or 20 cents per square foot. Are you proposing that you start at 20% or you start at 20% plus some CPI increase?
Not 20%, 20 cents.
I mean, I'm sorry, yeah, 20 cents. Yeah, I'm sorry.
We are proposing 20 cents and add the CPI, the current CPI clause, effective January 1, 2022, and then it would happen again, of course, January 1 of 2024.
Corey, what was that CPI number again you've been using?
8.1%.
Okay, so that gets us to basically 21.6 cents a foot, just as a baseline there.
Okay, so you're comparing apples to apples. The rate calculated in that prepayment was 20 cents a square foot for 5 years. The CPI increase that the airport manager gave you is the increase over 2 years. If you were going to compare it apples to apples, you would probably look at the CPI increase over the last 5 years. And I'm not advocating for that or advocating against it. This is your decision to make.
Can I interrupt this for just a minute? Because there's a piece of information I can't find here. Perhaps it's here and I'm not seeing it. How many square feet is the leasehold?
I can answer that. It's because you have a copy of the lease in your packet.
Well, I don't. I have a copy of
Oh.
the lease amendment and restatement. I don't.
Okay, and on the last page, it indicates the square footage.
See, I don't have that. I don't have that in mind. So mine goes from
So
something-
the parcel is 50,749,
50,749.
and that's in Exhibit A,
Yeah,
page
see,
20.
Aha, there it is. No, I stand corrected. It is there. It's buried in between the legal description. 5749. Okay. Thank you.
And then I also, Mr. Lewis, I also want to point out that we're discussing also having you surrender some of that square footage due to the drainage unusable area. Do we have that amount?
Hold on. Let's address that as a separate issue.
Okay.
As I suggest, because we got two separate issues here.
Well, wait a minute.
Yes, sir.
Changes.
Yeah, but let's follow this through. There's a reason why. You'll see why. Any other comments from the applicant on this matter? We're not talking about the drainage, just the renting.
No, I've stated my position or our position,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd like to hear, obviously from board members. I mean,
Sure.
this is a partnership, and that's the way we look at it.
You got it. I'd like to take an opportunity to read from the lease real quick on this matter, verbatim. This is page 2 of the lease amendment, I believe it is. Yeah, lease amendment and restatement. Page 2, section 3, article B. Beginning in the year 2022, the rate, that's the rental rate that's being referred to there, the rate will be set at the then current market rate for the remainder of the lease term and shall be adjusted by a reasonable CPI adjustment. Payments shall be made monthly with payments due on the first day of each month. On that note, I would entertain comments from Airport Authority members.
Mr. Chairman, it's just my thought from listening to the discussion and the recommendation to use the current market rate on the Bravo parcel of 28 cents. My thought is this. This lease has, if I'm correct, and what I see here, about 25 years remaining, which means that it is half the length of the current leases that we are offering on the airport. And in my view, that has something to do with the lease rent itself. In other words, a 25-year lease would be worth less than a 50-year lease. And the reason for that would be any infrastructure that is constructed on the leasehold would eventually become the property of the Airport Authority unless the lease were renegotiated. In addition to that, if the parties were to sell their interest in the lease and seek a reassignment for the parties purchasing the assets, I would think, would be worth considerably less, with 25 years remaining rather than 50. So I think these are the things that we, took into consideration, at least I would think, in determining 28 cents on 50-year lease. It seems to me that it would be more appropriate to take the 20 cents and apply the CPI increase and move forward in consideration of the fact that there are only 25 years remaining. That's my thought.
I agree.
in full recognition of the long-term relationship that the airport has with the applicant, I am loath to have the airport authority codify a concept that says that market rate for any land that we have is less than 28 cents right before we start writing leases on airport property. That concerns me of setting some kind of a precedent, although I do understand Member Norvell's argument as well. So I'm really opinionated that that the airport authority has no business setting a current lease rate at something other than the appraised value. I do, and I know Chairman Golden is going to chastise me for this, though. I do think that I do think that there's an opportunity to correctly identify what's the use of this land by combining some significant consideration on the next item on an agenda in exchange for, or not exchange for, but just to have the parcel be correctly managed. The current rate is 28 cents, but if we have unusable portion of that parcel, that ought to be rebated. And so those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think really good thoughts from both of these gentlemen. I'm listening to what Member Norvell says, and I'm trying to parse out in my mind when we talk about ascribing value to land under certain lease terms and a potential market value of an interest in a leasehold and its developments. I fully see the difference in value of the improvements to the leasehold given the number of years remaining before they would revert to airport ownership. That's crystal clear in my mind. Now, having just done a lot of work on behalf of the airport around appraisals and leases and things like that, one, I'm very much with the treasurer around being very aware of what the value of our land is and how the portion of the parcel we're talking about here tonight does or does not apples to apples compared to the appraised rate on the Bravo parcel, which we just had done, and recent appraisals of the Triangle parcel that we've had done. Now, I'll say that Corey can correct me if I'm wrong here, but in requesting those appraisals, and certainly in reviewing the appraisal reports, there really, I don't believe, is consideration in the appraised value on a per square foot basis given to the length of the lease. Okay, I don't know that is actually taken into account. Now, I'm going to say right on the heels of that, the other thing that I'm not sure to this day to what extent it's taken into account in our appraiser's work is any likely discount in this case, but any consideration of the amount of land being appraised as a single parcel, i.e. when you appraise a 12-acre parcel as a 12-acre parcel, does the price per square foot differ than if you were appraising a 2-acre parcel or a 1-acre parcel? And I don't know that we've ever really gotten to ground on how that lease rate, that appraised rate, which then becomes our baseline lease rate, is or isn't affected by the size of the parcel itself. So that's a question I just wanted to add to the consideration if we were entertaining copy paste of 28 cents a foot. There may be some other things in there as well. So to end that, I'll just say I don't know that the duration of the lease is something that factors into the appraisal, but maybe staff can illuminate us further on that.
Paul, do you have any comments on this?
I guess just my other question would be, not being that familiar with leases, is that we're trying to talk about the appraised value. Would the appraised be higher or lower with existing hangars on there? We're doing 28 cents a square foot for bare ground versus what would be the appraised value? Would it be higher or lower based on structure on there? I don't know that answer, but maybe someone else, would.
Tim?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I spent a lot of time looking into this when I saw this on the agenda, and we have to consider a few things. First of all, this lease agreement was done in response to a basic favor that was given to the airport authority, the airport, by helping the airport pre-fund some expenses. So they went out of their way to help the airport on a win-win situation, but they made an aggressive gesture by having this done. And the way the rent, and I see what Mr. Takis and I can see what Mr. Rogers says about the rent or the lease specifically says, CPI will be applied, and then if you want to renew, it's going to be at market rate or at a fair rate. And I understand that. I see that. But the other items that have to be considered is, number one, if they would have just gone ahead and not helped the airport and continued just with the normal lease, an escalating lease, without helping the airport, they'd be just doing CPI increases, correct? Correct. So unfortunately, which was unforeseen, I think, at the time, by doing a favor for the airport and then having this clause at the end at appraised value, which at the time probably didn't seem to be very relevant, it could possibly penalize them, up to 6, 7, 8 cents a foot, just due to the way the language was. And was that the intent? I don't know if it was or not. I would be a little bit, if I was the tenant, I would be a little bit, a little angry at the fact that I was helping the airport. I did this, for this purpose, and all of a sudden now I'm having to be subjected to an appraisal that we haven't even done, by the way. And by the way, the Triangle was appraised within 12 months of this year at 26 cents a foot. Bravo was appraised at 28 cents a foot. And those are both 50-year leases. If I was a business person, I would be very concerned about a 25-year lease as well. All these things were not recognized in this document. I fully understand the precedent issue is concerning. I fully understand that. I fully understand trying to just stay with the letter of the lease. But I would probably favor considering a CPI increase, but I think it starts applying 5 years back. You'd have to start the CPI increase because it seems like that's where it would start there, which would bring the lease to somewhere around 23, 24 cents, I think. I think that would be, as an airport authority, a fair and equitable way to mitigate a simple lease continuation. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Just to help with your math, Vice Chairman, if you take a 3.5% CPI and apply that compounded on 5 years on top of the 20 cents, it would get us to 24.3 cents, just for everyone's reference.
Let me weigh in on this. And I do want to preface this with my background. I've consummated over 1,000 lease transactions in my lifetime. Most of them were not ground leases. Many of them were. Quite a few were at airports. I happen to know a little bit about leases. Contrary to Member Norvell's comments, the longer the lease term, the less the rate, because that's of greater value to the landowner. The landowner has greater value with a longer term lease. Makes perfect sense. You go to a bank, you have a long-term lease. The bank underwrites that. You have a shorter term lease, you have less term of income. The bank will penalize you for that. Longer lease, less rate. Shorter lease, more rate. It's less risk to the tenant, more risk to the landlord. As to parcel size, the larger the parcel, the less the rent. Smaller the parcel, greater the rent. We had an appraisal done, came back at, correct me if I'm wrong, 28 cents a foot on about 12 acres. Is that correct? This is just over an acre. Call it an acre and a quarter for argument's sake. You know, I always use the phrase when I see things like this that pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. I don't see any way to lease this land with our fiduciary obligation to the taxpayer for anything less than 28 cents a foot. And not only do I not see any way to do that, let me point something out to the airport authority. There is another FBO lease of similar or greater size on the south side of the airport that comes up in less than 24 months that has a very, very substantially similar language in there to renew. Are we going to give consideration to that tenant of a discount of this magnitude from fair market value? Are we going to give, subsidize their rate because, well, they've been there and they have been there? There's no question about that. The problem I have with this is, again, I'm not looking at the people, I'm looking at the document. And the document says, then current market rent. That's what it says. Are we willing to discount that to the tune of $5,000 a year, roughly, give or take? Okay, hold on. Call it 2,000. It's 50,000 feet. Well, maybe not. Are we willing to do that? Number one. Number two, are we willing to give this same consideration to the next FBO lease that comes to us? Are we going to do that? Because if we're not going to do that, then we have to agree with the letter of the document. Because there's another lease that has substantially similar language with the ability to renew for a period of time, and it ain't 50 years, and it's about the same size, and if we do it here, we're going to have to do it there. So that is food for thought. I would suggest the applicant be happy with that 28 cents a foot, or we go to an appraisal and let the cards fall as they may. We should not be judge, jury, and arbiter at a lower rate than market value. Stan, I know you wanted to say something. Go for it. Okay. Okay, I'm just, stating the facts. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, I guess there's two possibilities. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Could I just be heard for a second? If you went the appraisal process, I heard some talk about the buildings. It wouldn't be appraised as an improved property. It would be appraised on the basis of how it was originally leased, which is raw land that the owner, the tenant actually bears the expense and enjoys the benefit of the improvements. So it would just be, we would appraise it as though it were bare space available for commercial FBO. And I would note that in the 28-cent appraisal that we received, we did ask the question, is this the same for hangar aircraft, aircraft storage hangars only versus commercial? And the appraiser, his response was really, if they don't have public access, if we're not providing them with public access, then they are the same. And so I see the 28 cents for, which was originally obtained for aircraft storage. I think that applies equally to the Gonai Aviation lot. Because, even though there's a fence there along Arrowhead Road, I think it's been fenced off. I don't think there's a gate there anymore. And so I don't think it's realistic to have access from the road to that parcel. I did want to point out one other thing too, is in the leases that the city has been approving for us of recent, they have insisted upon, and we've included a provision that every 15 years, the lease gets reappraised and the rental rate is reset based on an appraisal. Now here, this lease doesn't say there needs to be an appraisal. And so I think you have a little bit of flexibility here, but one of the later items that that you're going to take action on is going to have a lease that says after 15 years, there's an appraisal and you determine what the current market rate is. And so the fact that this one is coming up on a 15-year language, although it's slightly different, I don't think there's any harm in looking at it from the standpoint of, if you're guessing at what the appraised rate is, that's probably the right number to use, because that's the new standard that we're applying here at the airport. And that was input from the city that the airport has adopted in in the previous leases since they've done it. You know, the Ortiz lease has that. I believe the Giangreco lease has that. I know that the lease extensions that were done for aircraft storage only have that provision. The city was adamant. Now, part of that is driven by an argument you've probably heard before, which is we're using CPI to adjust real property values. Does the CPI really measure real property values? No. The CPI is designed as a measure of the amount of inflation on general goods. It's across the field as to different items it's applied to. And so frequently there's criticism saying CPI is not a very good way of determining what the increased value of the property is. But that's the tool that we have. That's the tool that the vast majority of real estate people use, because it's the thing that's out there. So, you know, if you got a hammer, that's what you use, I guess. But I don't think that you should, I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't be cautious about using an appraised rate, because that is what we're being driven to on all the other leases. I think that's an okay thing to do. On the other hand, I understand the arguments that Mr. Lewis is making. I think they're valid arguments. It's just a question of which path you think you should be taking.
And one more item, it's important to point out, this is not asking for a renewal. This is just mid-rent, mid-lease, so it's not, although I fully respect Mr. Golden's concern about people coming up that are asking for extensions. So that is very important, but it's not in exactly the same scenario here. We're kind of in a unique, this is a one-off for our
continuation.
yeah. So, and the chairman can put the vote together where they want, but I think I suggest we have two possibilities, unless we want to pay for an appraisal and so forth. I think that one would be to offer it with a CPI adjustment, but going back 5 years, what puts the lease around 23 cents, or putting it at 28 cents based on our last appraisal, and maybe we could vote either way. Would that be acceptable? Vote for either one of them? I don't know. It's up to the chair.
In and out of that, I'll wait for a regular motion in a second. I mean, there's, like, I think everyone's weighed in on the matter. I don't think there's any, certainly appreciate the ownership group. Again, I would ask.
Back 5 years.
I would ask.
Go back 5 years.
Are we going to do this for the next tenant that comes before us, who has substantially similar language in the lease? Because that's what we're faced with. That to me, that's really what bothers me more than anything. It concerns me. I can't get behind that. And anyone else, I don't know what other leases are out there, but I know there's one, and it's substantially similar to this. It is different, as Tim pointed out, but it is, they have the right to continue on for a period of time, just at fair market rent. So, you know, I'm sorry, that to me is fair market's fair market. So,
Mr. Chairman, I mean, we have a lease that has text that says then current market rate.
yes, we do.
We are about to consider an item where we set a minimum standard for what we'll accept for bids for a leasehold. And that is basically, again, based on the then current market rate. And we have to follow that per statute. That's our floor. So I think we've explored some questions that may still be open here about whether you have apples to apples there. Okay, and I think that different members have presented some thoughts on that. And if anything, my kind of takeaway is that an appraisal and that may be an option to go forward with, or have petitioners, have the option to choose, could actually end up with a higher number. Okay, I don't know that, but that's kind of what I'm hearing about. I do think that, we have to understand the text as it's written and recognize that it didn't just come out of the ether, that the very folks who are in the room tonight, in some cases, were part of negotiating that language and knew and should have understood, and I know did understand, that when that was negotiated, it was part of the consideration that both sides accepted. And so I don't think that to move forward and have a lease rate adjustment to the current market value dishonors the much appreciated decision to advance funds to the airport in a prepaid lease. That was a really great thing to do, and it was done in exchange for some consideration that's spelled out in this lease. So I don't think that taking that action dishonors or, sort of snubs, what was a great thing at the time. Everybody got to craft that language, and this is what was agreed upon. I don't know that anything other than an adjustment to current market rate would be expected by the people who signed that lease on both sides.
And it should also be noted that when they did advance those funds to the airport, they got something in return. They provided the discounted net present value of the lease at the time. So and it was not the same party that is before us today. It was a different ownership group. So perhaps Member Hunter, would you like to make a motion?
Well, I think the way to the trial balloon here is a motion to get back to the page here. I move to reset the rental rate at 28 cents per square foot per annum based on the current market rate established by the recent appraisal of the Bravo parcel.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to reset the current rate of the Gonai Aviation lease at the current appraised rate of 28 cents per square foot per annum, in accordance with the lease, which reads, beginning in the year 2022, the rent will be set at the then current market rate for the remainder of the lease term and shall be adjusted by a reasonable CPI adjustment. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's 4. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Looks to me like the motion carries. Now, on to the last item of this. I'd like to start, because I did some homework on this, Mr. Lewis, and I have a question for you. But I did take a look at this since we're neighbors, and I'm always at the airport. Took some pictures today to help me understand what's going on here. And I have a few questions for you, because I can see exactly what you're talking about. What I'm not sure of is, and this is where you can help me and the rest of my counterparts understand what exactly we're talking about. Now, if anyone would like to see pictures on the Airport Authority, if anyone would like to see what Mr. Lewis is referring to, I have some pictures.
It's on the packet.
Kind of. It's kind of on the packet.
This here?
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, not exactly. That's not exactly it. We're talking about the drainage area on the north side of your building, kind of hooks around. Is that correct?
It's what's depicted in the drawing that I sent to Ken Moen and then later Tim Pulitz on August 5th, 2021. It's in your packet.
I think that drawing's in the packet. Is that the drawing that's in the packet, Steve?
Yes, it is.
And looking at, just glancing at it, it looks to me like it's correct with respect to where the drainage ditch is. In terms of plotting it, though, were you able to plot the dimensions
This right
of the
here.
leasehold?
That's where I was going
Oh,
with
okay.
this. Yeah, I had
I
it,
just
but
don't know.
I had some real-time pictures here. And so we're talking, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve Lewis, we're talking about just this drainage area, correct? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay.
And from my understanding, Corey worked with the airport engineers and determined that to be roughly 5,500 square foot of area that would not.
This whole area back here.
Yes.
Okay, so what, understood. Now, that was my next question, is how much area is affected? So what the claim you're making is, which I can see some validity to, is that the city came in, put in this drainage area, made a portion of the property potentially unusable. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Corey had asked me for a very detailed background information since I was the one who was working at the time for Cubics, worked with Shaw Construction, specifically Ray Shaw. I was the one who designed that building and oversaw the construction of it. So in your packet, an email dated January 7th, time-stamped at 12:03, gives you a background. And part of the background, Mr. Chair, is prior to your ownership, and this goes back to really 1989, and of course, I've been on this airport operating since 76. The water, the natural flow that came down Gonai Road, hit Arrowhead Road, and then flowed to the east and dumped onto your property now, which is the El Arrow property. The original riprap for that drainage is still there. It basically divides right between the El Arrow property and the now Gonai property. In 1989 or 90, we had a pretty excessive winter year, so much so that it took silt and water and covered part of the concrete on one of your hangars facing northwest. At that time, Kathy Gilbert or Joe Green, the manager of El Arrow Services, complained numerous times to the City and Airport Authority. And so their fix was to move that natural flow of water more towards the corner, specific corner of Arrowhead and Gonai, and dump it onto then the Cubics lease. And then 4 or 5 years later, we had another excessive winter. It filled up that ditch. So the Public Works came back, made that ditch 300% larger, and then filled it with riprap. That's what exists today. And they also built and made a concrete basin to actually capture the water early that's coming down Gonai and divert it onto airport property. So obviously at that time, I can only imagine that when El Arrow Services, Joe Green or Kathy Gilbert started complaining about it, I am sure that the airport manager back then, likely Yvonne Weaver, and the city, Public Works, obviously worked together to come up with a solution so it would not flood out the El Arrow property. I don't know, I wasn't in those negotiations. But the bottom line is this. Kevin and I would like to invest more money in your airport and develop that corner. With the help of Tim Pulitz, myself, Kevin, and Corey, we actually went down to Public Works and met with them for about 40 minutes. And I think Corey would validate this. Our complaint literally fell on deaf ears. The bottom line is, don't you understand? The airport is city property, and we are dumping city water onto city property.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. I mean, I went out there, I saw it, trying to get the pictures to pull up on my iPad so I can show everybody. I'm having a bit of a tough time, unfortunately, doing this. So I can explain it to everyone. I understand where you're coming from, Steve. The question I have is, when you assume this lease from Cubics, Was that drainage ditch there?
I've already said it's been there since 1989, yes.
So the answer is yes.
Absolutely, yes.
So when you assume.
And Cubics had been complaining about it also for about 6 years because that drain kept plugging up and flooding out the area that Steve Takus talked about, their test site, which I'm very familiar with because I was the one that applied for the FCC permits for that test site.
Right. So, but all I'm getting at is you took.
We were totally aware of that,
You were
yes.
totally aware of it.
Absolutely.
You had complete knowledge and consent of it.
Yes.
Okay, that's where I was going with this. So now what you're saying is you'd like the airport to take back about 5,500 square feet of that?
No. We would love to develop it. We would love to continue to pay you money, rent money. But until the airport authority and Public Works can work out a proper way to quit dumping the water onto airport property, specifically our leasehold, there's no way to develop that. There are easy fixes for that, but Corey, you weigh in.
Yeah,
What was the attitude of Public Works?
Public Works was not very willing to help, especially at that meeting. They did not provide any suggested solutions for us.
Okay.
All we're trying to do is invest $40,000 to $50,000, make a nice
totally
ramp
get it.
there. But we can't do that, and the city was very clear. We cannot put up a retaining wall and force the water onto your property for fear that you would sue us. But that was the natural flow until they changed it.
So to that end, a question for Council Takus. I think I already know the answer to this question because I've grown up in Carson City. But there isn't an easement filed for the city to carve that usage out of the lease. I mean, we recognize this is, at the end of the day, airport property, which is city property. But I would imagine that a leasehold that's going to have a portion of it effectively unusable or made unusable by an action taken after that lease was originally granted would need some consideration. Has the city put us on strange terms here with one of our lessees by making changes to a leasehold and taking action to do that in a way that compromises the enjoyment and beneficial use of that leasehold mid-span in a lease?
I think your intuition is correct. If anybody, city or otherwise, gives a right to somebody and then takes part of it away, there should be some compensation for it. One of the things I'm a little bit concerned about, those that happened over 15 years ago, and the adverse possession statutes typically apply to 15 years. And so the time to complain would have been sometime within that 15-year period when it happened. Now, I'm just giving you the ideas off the top of my head, but I think principally you're right. I'm a little concerned about the adverse possession, but I thought I heard Mr. Lewis say there are some simple solutions, and if there's a solution, maybe we should all be working together on that solution. Is there like a French drain or something else we could put in that area that's, the green area on your map?
If I may, that was brought up at Public Works, and again, it literally fell on deaf ears. Public Works did not seem to have any appetite to make any change there. The existing drain that's on the north end of the Gonai leasehold actually runs north. It connects to the drainage that's under Arrowhead Drive. Then it flows east and ultimately gets to the open ditch that we all know and runs through airport property, crosses College Parkway, and goes by the Catholic Church. That's where that water goes. So the simple solution on city property, i.e. the south side of Arrowhead Drive, is to put a basin, a catch basin, right over the drainage that's going to that connector to Arrowhead. It seems like it would be a simple fix. We explained that, but Public Works did not want to hear that.
Was it because you were asking them to do it? I mean, were they objecting
It's on
to it?
city property, it's on the roadway.
And so they
and
were objecting to us do it either.
They basically said the conclusion was, look, it's city water flowing on city property.
City employees.
Mr. Lewis, didn't Mr. Takis mentioned that you should have complained about this within 15 years. Weren't you complaining about this for the last many years?
Well, I started my complaint to Ken Mullen, who did go out with myself, George Clary, my partner, who's now deceased, and 2 airport engineers. So they saw this, and they clearly said, yeah, this is not right. And they saw where the city had concreted a big ditch to make sure to capture all the water and divert it right in the corner of the leasehold. Now the riprap is almost full of silt again, and which causes the drainage.
You're talking about the rock area, correct?
The riprap area.
Yeah, in other words,
That
that's
is
the
now
area
all
that's-
full of silt, and therefore the drain plugs up all the time. And so it causes flooding in that area until somebody can go out there and clean it up. All I'm asking for is the city or the airport engineer has determined that there's 5,500 feet. I would simply ask the board to abate the 5,500 feet, continue to proactively work. I would ask that the airport manager work with Public Works to see if we can't ultimately mitigate this problem. And then we are happy to continue to pay the rent and then develop the property and invest there.
I ask another maybe dumb question, but did you guys discuss with Public Works maybe putting it in an underground facility? I mean, if the airport went in and constructed an underground facility, would that solve the problem?
The underground facility, Steve, is actually already there. The drain that's on my property runs to the east into the big Arrowhead drain. It would be very easy for me to explain, and it was very easy for me to explain to Public Works. They just, and obviously we were asking for them to pay for it. It's a city problem. The city is the one who created the culvert, the ditch, the basin, the catch basin up there on Arrowhead. It wasn't there before. It used to naturally roll down between El Arrow's property and the then Cubic's property.
Mr. Lewis.
They were the ones who changed it.
What you're describing, Mr. Lewis, let's all remember is, a sequence of events that also has to remember a time before what I guess we would have called the big pipe, although we'd all also agree it was not big enough. The big pipe was put in, the 48-inch pipe that runs between our Click Bond hangar and El Arrow, the big north-south underground that Steve was talking about, Mr. Lewis was talking about, that takes it down under College Parkway. But I think what you're describing is that the underground facility, meaning the subterranean pipe to take these flows under Arrowhead Drive to the north, send them east in the ditch and combine them with the stuff coming west from Ryan Way on the north side of Arrowhead and send them all south in the big pipe, is already there. What we have is a last mile problem where getting from where it collects on the east side of Gonai to where it needs to get into that existing development is missing here. So it's not build the whole thing, but maybe it's connect.
No, it's really just putting another catch basin on Arrowhead, going straight down, connecting to the underground culvert that's already there, that already connects to Arrowhead. That way, they can then divert the water down about 122 feet, to be exact, east on Arrowhead Drive, drop the water there, catching it on Arrowhead Drive, none of it going onto airport property,
Yeah,
which then would allow us to develop the property.
What you're talking about is obviously the reasonable fix, because I looked at it and I'm thinking to myself, what in the world were they thinking? Because you have this, to explain this to everyone, I mean, I know Tim knows this pretty well, and it's kind of in our board document, but what you don't see unless you go out there is there's a rock drainage area coming from Arrowhead, and it goes kind of downhill almost to the Cubic's hangar, makes a hard turn eastbound, and what I can't figure is where does it go from there? Because it looks like it's just ponding up.
No, there's a drain there. There's a
That
catch
drain
basin.
must be clogged.
It was plugged up on the 7th when I sent this
Okay,
note
because
to,
there is so much
Cory.
ice over there.
Yes.
Okay, because I did my homework on this one.
It's a
It was
it's a
fine.
poor design, but
Yeah.
in fact, there is a drain there.
Okay. And that's problematic too, because you got ice buildup next to your building. I mean, literally on top of your building.
It's causing all types of issues. And so
Okay.
obviously we tried to have it fixed. We brought the city a solution.
Let
It was
me-
just the wrong day, I guess, that we approached
we
Public
have
Works.
we have our city representative sitting right over here in Stan. Stan, what can you help us
Who
with?
did you talk to?
Who did we talk to? I have it in my notes. Stephen,
Okay?
yes. And the actual date and time of that meeting is in your packet.
I think it's incumbent upon us to help fix the problem.
I couldn't
But
agree.
until the problem's been resolved, is it fair to be charging him a lease for something he can't legally use? That would be the only place in our whole airport where,
Well, Mr. Vice
Unusable.
Chairman, I mean, that's what's in my mind is, why I asked council the question I did. Learned something tonight about kind of what the statute of limitations, if you will, on, on that might be. But hey, all that aside, I see a tenant who is not able to actually enjoy the land that they're paying for as a result of action, not by this body, but, by the body that we represent in a certain way, indirectly. And so I think, I'm kind of a shared mind where you are, Tim, that some sort of an abatement of rents, would not be unreasonable until this could be dealt with. What that does is, I think, recognizes that denial of use that has been brought forward, not for the first time here tonight, and at the same time puts a little bit of fire under this body to really work with the city and get to a good solution here. And there may even be maybe a different conversation for a different time. I don't know if there's anything that the feds would contribute to in this regard as well, based on improvements to airport property that will make it more usable for aviation uses. So that might even be another avenue to explore in offsetting the cost on this.
Steve, quick question for you, sir. I'm staring over at Tim's iPad and looking at 5,500 feet.
5,500 feet.
Yeah, and I looked at, the diagram that's in our board packet here. What I'm failing to understand here is, I understand there's definitely a portion of this you cannot use. I'm failing to understand how we get 5,500 feet out of that.
That was, I did not come up with that number.
Yeah,
That was
because
a
I
num-
don't.
That was a
I'm just
number
saying-
that your airport manager came up with in conjunction with your two engineers.
Engineers, yeah.
Okay.
That wasn't produced by a surveyor. It was produced by the engineering team. So it does not identify the exact borders of their leasehold.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably not perfect, but it
Okay.
is a good representation of the amount of space that is unusable.
So what we're talking about is, for argument's sake, or to clarify, from that drainage ditch, that rock covered drainage ditch, west. Is that, for all intents and
It's
purposes?
basically coming off of Arrowhead, coming south, turning east, and that area
In
represents.
other words, this area here in our board packet that's back here that you really
Yeah.
can't access because of all the rock
Right.
Yeah.
that's
I
covering.
think in your board packet, it's identified in a magenta color,
Blue.
5,500 feet. Oh,
Right,
blue,
so like
okay,
that, yeah.
fine. So that, I didn't define that area. That was the airport
Right.
engineer that defined it.
Right. Okay, I just want to
Yeah.
make that clear for everyone.
So just to simplify this, if the board decides to temporarily mitigate this at a 28 cents a foot annual, that's only a $1,540 discount off their lease. I think it'd be wise to consider that just as a gesture until we see if we can get this dang thing mitigated or not. That's just my thoughts.
What does our legal counsel have to say about this?
I think you can do that. You're essentially giving him a 10% reduction on his leasehold, if I understand the square footage. But I would want you to craft what that language would say in terms of how long and what needs to be done to rectify it, because otherwise,
Yeah, it can't go on in
if
perpetuity.
you leave it in perpetuity, then really the better solution is simply remove that area from the leasehold.
Correct.
Yeah, we're not asking it to be removed. We want it to be fixed so we can invest in that corner.
That's a fair request.
Mr. Lewis, I mean, I'm looking at this at this particular piece of property, and to me, we have a combination of very difficult to work with city managers.
Engineer.
Yeah, yeah. But it seems like it's pretty undesirable property to park a plane on, and because it's right on the corner, heavy traffic, kitty corner from Cinder Light, a lot of dust, a lot of heavy, it's just like, it seems like we might be better off just removing it from the lease, on a permanent basis. But I don't have the right to do that, but I'm wondering why that's
No,
undesirable.
We actually see it as desirable, and quite frankly, it would clean up the corner. It would make the airport look a little bit better in that corner. It's usable land, and we would like to use it.
It's mostly usable, most of it.
Center Light across the street as well?
They're up on Gonai Road on the west side of
Oh, they
Gonai
are?
Road.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
kitty corner.
Okay, all right.
They start up on the, diagonally across that intersection. So,
Is
Uh,
all,
the- the-
is all 5,500 feet described rendered unusable because of this condition?
I would,
To ask
I
that
would,
question.
I would say it's pretty tough to make any improvements in this the way it stands today for that area.
Is there any guesstimate been made on what it would take to make the improvements that Mr. Lewis has suggested? Is that a $50,000 project, or is that a $2 million project?
I personally think it's 15 to 20,000.
That's pretty difficult to determine with the information we have right now. Because if they did have to cross that road, it could be more significant.
Yeah, they would not have to cross the road. They would literally have to go just straight down and catch the vertical that's running north from my drainage to the underground drainage that's under Arrowhead. It's actually pretty simple.
And is that change all on airport property, or is it partially on airport and partially on outside?
100% on the roadway of Arrowhead Drive. It's not on airport property at all. That fix.
Yeah, it's just a screwy fix they put in. There's no question about that.
So Stan, what do you think our chances are of getting the city to listen, to lend us an ear?
I'm not going to comment until I talk to them, but I'm sure they'll listen to you. I'm not going to say they're going to do anything, but I'll force them to listen to us and plead our case. And they're not that unreasonable.
And so what do you think would be a reasonable time frame to set for ourselves to do an abatement? If we were going to sunset it at some point in time, and what would be your best guess? What would be an appropriate time frame for that?
2 or 3 years. Probably 2 years, time you get it in the CIP and the budget. Probably 3 years closer.
So 3 years.
Any appetite on the board for a historical to go back in time, and
No.
and compensate the leaseholder for the fact that this has been true for longer than just now? You want to go backwards instead of forward, or just forward?
I think the applicant answered that question earlier. They took this lease knowing this condition was there.
And we brought it to the airport manager's attention a year and a half ago. That was Ken Moen. So we started right away. And obviously, we know the history at the airport. And that's when Tim Pulitz was sitting in the chair as interim. That's the copy you have of the email and the drawing, and then a follow-up to Corey on January 7th. So the whole reason for the ask of the abatement is to put pressure on you so you can put pressure onto the Public Works.
I think we ought to condition the abatement on something too. We've heard from the applicant that the applicant's going to improve this and going to, build ramp area out there. I think the abatement should be conditioned upon that occurring so that if it doesn't occur, the applicant is on the hook to let the airport recover the funds that were abated.
I'm okay with that thought process, but I really think that we not only abate it going forward, but we ought to compensate the applicant for the time, for the time frame when that land was unusable from the time of that letter that he wrote to Ken.
I will say I don't disagree with that. Charging them for land they can't use doesn't make sense in the past and in the future. So,
So can we possibly have someone make a motion that addresses that so we can move on?
Is it 5,500 feet?
Yes, 5,500 feet.
So $1,100 a year at the 20 cents a foot rate, if you want to do something
Right.
retroactive.
For a year and a half or so, is that what that is?
So $1,650 of impact if we gave them a year and a half in retrograde.
Right.
And I think, Stan's probably right on about what this reasonably would take. Of course, if, I think your interests are having this get fixed as fast as possible. So I think though, what I'm hearing is if we're going to consider a go forward abatement, it would be at this point for a period of 2 years.
And that would represent $1,540 a year.
Council, you have any problem with, you think this all can be written into the lease changes that we're making?
Yeah, I think it can. I think that we should probably do an amendment to the lease so that all this is reflected. But yeah, no, I think we could do all of that. I just need clear direction on what you're doing.
So the motion would be one of these, approve the terms and direct staff to draft a lease amendment that encompasses those, right?
I'd be more comfortable by saying 3 years. 2 years is crowding it.
I like 3 years also.
And write this down correctly. It's 3 years abatement of the rent. And what was the time frame for constructing the ramp? Or was that not part of it?
No,
I'm
not
sorry.
part of it. It's just
Not
that
part of
they-
it? Okay.
Well, I don't know.
What I had suggested was that abatement is conditioned upon the applicant constructing the ramp. If we jump through these hoops, get this resolved, we've abated the rent, and then you don't construct the ramp, that's
All I
That
can,
don't
all
fly
I
with
can
me.
tell you is today, in today's economy, we would like to go forward. If inflation is 65% 3 years from now,
maybe the thing
and
to
we're
do
all
is
starving to death, I'd probably change my mind.
maybe the thing to do is to go forward to force the building department and Public Works to address this.
We tried that. They
So
just
you've
don't
submitted
have an
plans to the
appetite.
building department?
No, because the city is telling us that I can't interrupt the flow of water. It's their flow of water. Don't you
Oh,
seem
boy.
to understand?
Yeah,
It's
no.
It's their airport,
Yeah.
not yours.
Yeah, okay.
I think the way that you'd incorporate that, and I do think that's a good clause, okay, to say that this rebate and abatement is conditioned upon completion of this. And if you found that completion of that due to the 65% inflation, refunding the rebate would be a lot cheaper than building this $2 million tiny ramp at that inflation rate. So I think you'd know the choice to make at that time. I think it'd be pretty simple to just say that construction of the ramp, construction of an improvement on that area, must be completed within X months of the condition being remedied.
Yeah, I would recommend that once and if the Public Works can mitigate this issue, standard, I think, in the Airport Authority is the applicant come within the first 12 months with plans and seeking your approval, and then construction after that. So I would say that construction to begin, in the second year, but I still have to
The
come.
same terms we tend to do on our lease. A year of
Exactly.
planning, a
I
year of
still have to
building.
come to you for approval.
That's fair.
So my proposal is that we not only do we abate the 5,500 square feet going forward, but we, in addition, prorate an abatement for the year and a half over that 3-year period. So it's an abatement of the rent plus a amortized abatement, an amortized refund for that unused land for the period of time since the letter was first written to Ken Mullen.
The only challenge there, Treasurer, is that if the good news comes and we resolve this faster than 3 years, then I guess we just have to recognize that they still are due. Yeah. So it might be easier just to take care of if this body agrees to do something to rebate back rent, to just get that out of the way up front. Just for that reason, because then you don't have to try to re-amortize that if the time frame changes.
It's only about $1,100, isn't it, Carl? It's not a big deal. Let's just do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's make a motion.
For that.
Carl, you want to make the motion?
Because it's my birthday. Okay, I'll give a whack at this. I move to rebate rebate the lessee's rent to the tune of 20 cents a square foot times 5,500 square feet for 1.5 years or 18 months. And to 2, abate the rent on 5,500 square feet of property, of the leasehold property, for up to 3 years going forward from this date. All of this conditioned that within, that when the corrections are made to the leasehold property to allow development, that development happen within the 2-year period as described in our typical leases, 1 year for planning, 1 year for construction.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to provide a retroactive lease refund for 18 months on 5,500 feet of the Gonai Aviation lease at 20 cents per square foot, which is $1,100, and to abate the rent going forward for a period of up to 3 years at the current market rate of 28 cents a foot on that 5,500 feet. If you could finish it up, Carl. There was a mouthful there.
Conditioned on there actually being construction of improvements following the correction of the drainage issue within the 1 year planning, 1 year construction period that we typically use.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for taking an hour of your time.
Now,
You've got
that had to
far
happen.
more.
Now you see why I moved this up on the agenda.
Yeah, and I really appreciate
This way
that.
you can go home and
Yeah.
enjoy yourself.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
And just real quick for clarification, since we're already in the midst of paying lease, which we did pay in January at a different rate, going forward for the February rent, we use the 28 cents and pull out 5,500 square feet. Is that correct?
Bingo. Yep.
Okay.
And reconcile January
I'll
with,
reconcile January.
with Corey and with John.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay,
The 28 cents a foot rate started on January 1st.
exactly.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll put that all together and I can copy you. I'll send it to Corey.
Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna put that on staff. Corey, could you ask our bookkeeper to process a bill based on what we discussed tonight, an invoice to Gonai Aviation, please?
I will do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to recommend, since we've been at this for about an hour and 45 minutes, we take a 5 to 10 minute break. And we're going to adjourn for a short period and then come back and eat into our next couple of items. Okay, we are back in session at approximately 7:30 this evening after taking a little break here. And I'm going to ask a question of our legal counsel real quick. We're moving on to items numbers 3 and 4 since we've already addressed 5. And in going through this, can we handle these as one discussion item or should we break them up as 2?
I think you should really break them up as 2 items.
Okay.
I think I think it'll go quicker, actually.
That's fine. No, that's fine. So we'll start with item number 3, discussion and possible action. A decision on whether to lease the Bravo parcel as a single parcel. A decision on size of parcels for the triangle lease and or determination of minimum or maximum size of parcels to lease. Supporting documentation needed for leasing. So we have prepared survey documents identifying what we're referring to as the Bravo lease parcel and the triangle lease parcel. We have been approached by multiple parties interested in leasing Airport Authority property for aviation purposes. We actually have 3 of them in the audience this evening. Thank you all very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Appreciate it. Carson Tahoe Executive has requested that the Bravo parcel of approximately 12 acres be leased as one parcel. We have to determine as an Airport Authority Board whether it's appropriate to lease that parcel as one parcel or to split it up. As for the triangle parcel, a similar determination would be considered for size of parcels to be made available, and the authority will also consider which documents to require for bid responses. On that note, that kind of opens our discussion. To me, this is the most important discussion we will have as an airport authority, in my opinion. But while I'm sitting up here, I think we won't have a more important discussion. So, on that note, is there anyone who would like to lead the conversation?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Why don't I just take the lead, and I'll try to be very brief about this. The first item is whether to lease Bravo in pieces or as a singular parcel. And one of the considerations there is that there's through the fence access along that east fence line. And so the entity that's requested, that first came to us to request to make it available, Carson Tahoe Executive, I believe, and I would like them to confirm at some point, that they either own or they have control over the development of the property on the east side of the fence. Because then it, by making it available as one parcel, they could come in and bid on it and resolve any dispute or any coordination of development on both sides of the fence. And I think that would be advantageous to both the airport and whoever successfully bids on it. So for the Bravo parcel, the issue is, do you do it as a single parcel or break it into pieces? We've supplied in your briefing package some different ways to break it into pieces if you were to break it in pieces. But I think our recommendation, at least the airport staff recommendation, is that go out as one piece. A similar type of process, but perhaps with a different result, should be taking place for the triangle. We're not in a position to lease out the triangle area now because we still don't have the appraisal. But you should decide, how should the triangle piece be broken up, if at all, because that will help the airport staff get that ready for the next agenda or whenever we have that appraisal, which hopefully will be by the next agenda, so that we have a cohesive thing that we can put out there so that people can see what's being made available to them and how they might put their projects into it. And the last thing is there was a comparison form. One of the problems is sometimes when we get these bid proposals, even though in our resolution we identify what they need to include, sometimes it's hard to compare them side by side. And so I believe the chairman was the one who came up with a simple comparison tool, and it's the sheet that we distributed at the beginning of the meeting, and it's posted to the webpage, that just allows us to, at a glance on one sheet of paper, compare different bids to the extent we get different bids. And so those are the 3 items. And so I'm happy to answer questions or allow you to, you guys just take on your discussion and make your decisions.
I'd like to lead the discussion to address some of these matters and opine a little bit, but I'd like to hear from other airport authority members on a logistical matter. Does everyone on the airport authority have this form? You got that? Okay. I created this so that when we do have a proposal from a party, we have at least a cover of conformity. We can look at, compare, and contrast if we have competing parties that are bidding. This is not set in stone. Any additions, revisions, now would be a good time to discuss it. On the matter of the Bravo parcel, there is a historical precedent that I want to bring to everybody's attention. John will remember this. I know Paul will definitely remember this. Other members of the airport authority may not have been here at the time, but our council brought up through the fence access in coordination with the property owner on the east side of the fence. It's fee simple interest and off airport property, and that property owner has through the fence access, and that we could better coordinate if we leased the entire parcel to the same party. In a time prior, a number of years ago, the airport authority did identify and designate those through the fence access points. We actually have a plan that was accepted by the former property owner on the east side of the fence. I'm confident some of us remember that. So we have set access points that are there that have been agreed upon and kind of run with the property. That said, I always believe in highest and best use when it comes to real property matters. It's certainly advantageous to have one party lease the entire parcel. No question about it. I think that would be, not speaking for the airport authority, but I'm just giving my own opinion. I believe it would be advantageous to have one party lease those 12 acres, provided that whatever party leases those 12 acres develops the 12 acres and isn't holding on to it for 3, 4, 5 years and not doing anything with it. When I say lease, I mean lease and develop the whole property. The airport authority historically has really been inclined to have developments where there are multiple hangars or multiple buildings on one parcel. It's to the airport's advantage to do so. So in that respect, I see some benefit. On the other hand, if it's not going to be all developed at once, we should really go with highest and best use and leverage our capacity there to bring in more revenue to the airport. So on that, open to discussion. Those are my comments. Yeah, we absolutely can. Why don't we start, unless the public would like to? Yeah, please. If you could introduce yourselves, and we're here to serve you. So,
my name is David Vincent. I currently have an airplane that I keep at Reno. About a year and a half ago, me and my partner, Mark, I can't think of his last name, we started a company called High Plains Hangar, and our plan was, we talked to Ken, we were going to do what the Ortiz brothers was doing before they did it. It just kind of fell apart. But circling back, I understand the idea. From my point of view, I'm just a guy who wants a nice hangar, but I don't want to pay $600,000 to store my $120,000 airplane, especially for a steel rectangle building with no heat or, minimal facilities. That seems to be sort of the group that people are building hangars for nowadays, the PC-12 or the CJ3 guy. And I'm like, well, what about the rest of us? So I'm comfortable with the idea of letting someone build on 12 acres, but I think that they should build some hangars that can accommodate people like me. As an alternative, if land can be set aside for people to build their own individual hangars, meaning some sort of architectural standard that the airport wants to apply to them, I think that you might find that people are willing to do that, especially for a 50-year lease. I'm very comfortable with investing, the $400,000 it might take to build my hangar because it has value to it and I can resell it because I'm not going to be alive in 50 years. And my son, he can use it for some time too, and then we can sell it, or he'll sell it. So I'm okay with that. But and having some land set aside for people like us, I think would be hopefully inappropriate and something that the airport could get behind.
And that's why we're having this discussion tonight.
Yeah, so that way, the big guys get covered, and the little guys who just want a hangar to park their airplanes in too. We don't necessarily need, lofts and marble floors and all those things, We just want a safe, clean, warm place to put our babies in. And that's where I come from, or my point of view.
No arguments from here.
And then, and just for my education, what is a preferred parcel size if you wanted to do that?
Well, I think that if you're gonna build one hangar, I think why not build two at the same time? But my understanding is for codes and stuff, there's probably an ideal size you want to be underneath to get away from like the fire suppression requirements, things like that. So if you can build two hangars and then sell the other one, or two of them get together, one building, a wall between them, and the two hangar entrances, that is, that probably will fit the guy that has the single engine airplane. That'll meet their needs. And then, as I said, there could be some kind of architectural standard colors that the airport prefers. But if you set aside a couple of acres to do that, you could probably fit quite a few 2,500 square foot hangars. I think those would probably be plenty big for.
Again, that's why we're having this discussion tonight, to identify.
I'm not sure what the size of the hangar limit is before you have to have all the fire suppression and expensive things. 5,000 square feet. So
that's been my experience.
Okay, so two hangars and the total is 4,999 square
Bingo.
feet. That'll keep two guys with. You can put a lot of RV7s like I have in a hangar like that, probably 3 in each hangar. And there's a lot of people like me who are happy to share a hangar, happy to all buy it together, and then we have a nice, clean place. Because Reno, the hangars are not clean and they're not nice.
So that's 10,000 square feet under roof. What is the parcel size underneath that? Michael, what is your?
Well, you're gonna have, that's coverage. There's also ramp area. There's also setbacks.
So is that a 15,000 foot?
I don't want to say because I'm not the building department, but again, I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier because it's important to the discussion this evening that we're going to have on this matter. The airport historically has shied away from individual hangars. There's a couple out there, but the airport's preference is to have an association, like a condominium association, that has a half a dozen or a dozen hangars on a parcel. So that group is responsible for all those hangars and all that property. Keep in mind when you're building hangars, again, there's setback requirements, there's landscaping requirements, there's drainage requirements, as you heard earlier. There's drainage issues.
Yeah.
And there's ramp. You got to have ramp. You got to pay for your own ramp. You lease the land where your ramp is until it joins taxiway or taxi lane.
Well, so just kind of walking around, the Minden Carson, Stead. It seems like the three airports have different ideas on hangars. Stead, seems more the independent build your hangar. So you see a lot of hangars there that have the 1 foot space between them to get away from the expensive costs. Minden is the only place in this area that I actually see the metal for the hangar building actually on the ground waiting to be assembled. There's none of that's in Stead, none of that's in Reno. So that looks like will be the newest hangar to go up in northern Nevada. Looks like Minden, as soon as he can get someone to assemble it. All the stuff is there. He's got the lot there. He just has to assemble it. And so Minden seems to take on a different tack than Carson in that individuals seem to build hangars again with the foot or so between them. They don't have bathrooms. They don't have any of that nice stuff. But I think if you set aside, again, like the GA, but the problem we ran into is when we were going to do our project where the brothers are doing theirs, is it was, at the time, the building was going to be $1.5 million. And for a guy who just really wanted a hangar, it was way above my pay grade, so we stopped. But now costs are even more. And then we were trying to figure out ways to get around some of the building codes, the firewalls, because those added a huge amount of cost, the fire suppression. So
fire suppression kicks in at 5,000 feet.
So if Carson would allow someone to develop 2 acres, and you could put, probably, I don't know, 8, 10 hangars on that, but do it in, the 4,999 square feet, a foot between the building or whatever the code says, another hangar like that would make it more affordable for, I think, the smaller guys like us to build, and then we could sell them to people who are the Bonanza owners and not the PC-12 owners.
That's why we're having this discussion this evening. So if we could wrap up the public comment on that, I think that if you folks are here while we're having this discussion, we'll give you another opportunity to weigh in when we're done. But I think we may answer a lot of your questions through this discussion. Do you have anything to say, sir?
No, I just moved here.
Okay.
I arrived here on the 12th. I'm Reno's newest resident.
Where are you from?
Where I'm from is West Virginia.
Okay.
But that's not where I came from.
Yeah, what do you fly?
I don't have a plane. I'm a airline pilot.
Oh, okay.
But I took the early out when the pandemic started, and I'm still interested in flying, and I moved here because I like the area.
Can't knock it.
No.
Some of us have
and
lived here
Dave's a
all
good
our
friend.
lives.
We go way back to Hawaii. I'm on the side where I would also like to be able to have a hangar or share a hangar, and I'd also like to invest in Carson City Airport for other people to come in like myself, or people that may come from other places and have a PC-12 or something of similar.
And again, that's why we're here tonight, to kind of set forth the ground rules, if you will, or the parameters of what we're going to be looking for, because we don't even know.
And I don't see anybody else here.
Well,
except for this gentleman behind us, who's also interested in the same thing. But we met with Corey, and went and saw the property, and it was impressive. But it doesn't seem like anybody's doing anything.
And we know what the lease rate is. You heard it. Here, you heard it here first. We can't do anything about that. That's a statutory matter. So if it answers your question, that's the floor. It's 28 cents a foot.
Yeah.
Per annum.
Right.
Yep.
And then a lot of people have been talking about hangars for years, but nothing's being built. So Reno, Stellar's got stuff locked up for years, but again, nothing, not one rock is moved in the area they say they're gonna build. So Stead, I think finally, Aviation Classics is gonna develop a parcel But again, I haven't seen, there's no bulldozers out there. I haven't seen a rock move yet, so we'll see how that comes to fruition. But just seems to be a lot of land locked up around airports that nobody's doing anything with.
Well, here's the opportunity,
Yeah.
because we're going to be putting this land out to bid.
Well, thanks a lot for hearing us out.
Okay, just,
you.
yeah, yeah, thank you for your comment, and hear what we have to say, because again, I think it's going to answer a lot of your questions that you may have right now, and more that you may have later. I think you're going to hear from us what we're looking for collectively as a body. Yep. Sir, do you have anything you'd like to opine on? Okay, fair enough. Away we go.
I'll be happy to to take the next leg of the race. A couple of the things that have been mentioned so far with regard to the Bravo parcel. Chairman touched upon the fact that it is due west of a large parallel strip of land of fee simple off airport property. To answer Council's question, I did just confirm on the Carson City GIS site that parcel is owned by Carson Tahoe Executive Air Park or Executive Park. So the same CTE that has expressed lease interest in lease parcels. So to answer that question, one of the things that is interesting about having the same party own that fee simple parcel and lease the Bravo parcel is a sort of built-in simpatico around the now, I think, easement recorded through the fence access points and taxi lanes. There's actually kind of an interesting thing that happens if you have the same party with both of those parcels, in that, in a way, they can now just change it up and optimize where those go, because you're not fighting with yourself between the office park and the hangars you want to develop on the fee simple parcel and the storage hangars and potential, since we're putting this out through a process that would allow commercial use, maintenance shops, FBO type facilities of various sorts that could also be on the Bravo parcel, in addition to aircraft storage as well. And so there is an element there, I think, of to be considered around attractiveness of the parcel to whom and in what shape, and some maybe special features that come if there is common ownership or leasehold between those two. The thing that I really wanted to call attention to as we continue this conversation is something that has come up in my conversations with parties, particularly as was mentioned, CTE, in a sort of frustration around, wait a second, but there's no utilities on this parcel. It's like, there are no utilities on this parcel. And that is you as the lessors, or the lessee's job is to put those in. I mean, they exist in Arrowhead Drive, but no, they don't exist on this parcel. Why am I mentioning this here? The person or persons or entities that lease this parcel altogether or in chunks are going to need to do quite a bit of infrastructure development. And really, it's bringing everything from utilities, drainage, and so forth, all the way from the north end to the south end of that parcel. And you have the Arrowhead entrance and you have the Lamont entrance. There are a couple of ways to bring that in. But also bringing access and a roadway to all of the various developments along that parcel. And so it's just something to be thoughtful about, in the sense that there's a lot that benefits in this parcel from having an integrated approach. And there's a real question that if it's chopped into pieces, who would move first? Because you kind of can't do anything, maybe with the exception of starting at the north and working your way south, which may or may not have the best sequence of uses, unless you're really thinking about it as a piece. So I just would offer that as a real world example of some of the considerations that have gone into thinking about that parcel from folks who have expressed practical interest in it.
I'll take a shot. I can be pretty quick. Mr. Chairman, I think you expressed it properly, as did Member Hutter. with respect to the 12 acre. I don't really have much to add there. I think it will be proper to just looking at the language here, lease the triangle parcel as several pieces to be divided, in whatever way we determine, giving several parties the opportunity to, look at that property that might suit their interests, rather than leasing that, 44 acres as one contiguous parcel. In addition to that, I have two questions. It seems that one of the reasons that we brought in all of that fill down by the Wyco property, which is at the southwest end of the runway. If you take the access road around, you'll note that that parcel is built up considerably. It was in a floodplain and was not developable. In fact, at one point, Mr. Takos will recall, we had to reclaim that property from someone who had leased it, and that was one of the problems. Well, that property is now leasable as far as I understand, and a small development could be done there. In addition to that, and Mr. Takos might clarify this, but when we moved the fuel island, did we not bring water and sewer? In fact, Mr. Chairman, you may know the answer to that, but there is, I thought, in the northeast corner of the fuel island, there are some hookups available if a building were to be built there, like a restrooms or something of that sort.
Well, let me clarify that. There is water, there is power, lots of power. There is sewer. There is communications. There is no natural gas. All on that leasehold.
And does it come in from Arrowhead?
No, it does not.
Okay.
It comes in off a lateral from immediately from the west.
Okay, so that would not help the 12-acre parcel.
Nope.
Okay.
Not at all. That would be a huge disruption to that property to even.
I was just curious.
I'm just saying I don't see. Maybe you could hook up sewer there. I don't know. From the 12 acres, there is plenty of power there, but it's not going to power 12 acres of hangars.
They're going to need to bring it in from Arrowhead. In other words.
Yep.
And then again, as I said, the triangle. I think we should look at leasing those as different parcels, perhaps, maybe through one lease offering.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how it would be structured. Vice Chairman Pulis had come up with a diagram for 3 or 4 hangars, Tim.
I made a diagram with 3 or 4 2-acre parcels with variety of hangars that are similar to what.
Yeah, and the airport
are on the
layout
airport.
plan has some, proposed configuration, for example. But other than that, I think that's my 2 cents.
John?
I've talked to multiple, we've been talking about this for a long time, so. Yeah, I definitely support the East of Bravo as a single parcel, and I think we ought to entertain bids on the triangle parcel and with a minimum lot sizes of 2 acres.
Tim?
I completely concur with Mr. Rogers. I think that the 12-acre parcel as one parcel in Bravo is appropriate. I do believe that we have some work to do on parceling the triangle, but I do support a minimum of 2-acre segments that could accommodate a condo association like these gentlemen here in the audience today are talking about, where they can come up and get a little group together and build a half a dozen hangars, make it cost effective, meet our airport standards, and be a win-win. So that's the way I would look at it as well.
What do you say, Stan? Paul?
Yeah, I agree. A 12-acre single parcel triangle, break it up, minimum 2. And how we do that, I guess we'll figure that out. And I guess we also might want to start thinking about the property southwest that Harlow mentioned as another possible development area. We don't really have that here, but we ought to probably add that to the mix and perhaps do a land survey, figure what we got.
If I might make just one other comment, because it really pertained more to the triangle side. In my study over the last couple months of these parcels and, putting a lot of thought to it, there are 2 other comments I'd make just thinking about them as a set. I'm very happy that the direction that this body seems to be heading in and we're going to entertain tonight is going out in a bid process on at least the Bravo parcel. Maybe we haven't talked about the Triangle parcel, but it sounds like that way as well. Particularly to the Bravo parcel, the idea of using a process that keeps the opportunity for commercial use, not just a storage-only use, open is pretty important to me from a best and highest standpoint, because the Bravo parcel, not to say we won't get into it here tonight, it's not without its civil engineering challenges around access roadway to support the commercial use because of airside, landside division, but it's far more suitable than the Triangle parcel is for that type of use. To bring public access, what does that mean here? I mean landside versus airside. So the UPS guy, the Sparklets person, the employee candidate, all of these folks that aren't going to be going through the fence to get to your parking lot, that's going to be a lot harder to do on the Triangle. So I think that the Triangle, from my assessment, was the better one for thinking about storage only, and the Bravo parcel being the better opportunity for commercial use. The second thing I just would note quickly as we get to the items later tonight, or in the next item, is this. From a practical standpoint, what is the largest parcel that somebody is going to reasonably lease and be able to develop or commit to develop within a time frame that this body is comfortable with? And I would suggest that the conversation that's coming tonight will help us fill in the blanks a little bit there. But the shorthand is, I don't think that someone is going to practically lease 43 acres and build it within 10 years. That's kind of the shorthand on that. So long story short, I do see the value in thinking about the Triangle in more digestible chunks. Nothing keeps somebody from bidding on 5 of those chunks and winning on 5 of those chunks. But it does put things, I think, in a little bit more of a manageable perspective. And our concern as we get to the details in subsequent meetings down the road are going to be, and I love the comments that were made by Mr. Vincent about, let's think about how can we streamline the process for development without compromising either on the variety of hangars we have or the look and feel and the standards of these things. So if this body eventually can develop, the Architectural and Landscape Committee guidelines that will help people be conforming with the least amount of overhead, that'll be great.
Let me bring us back to center line because we made some good progress here. Okay, there's one thing I do disagree with that I've heard from everyone. I'll get to that in a minute, but I think there's consensus to go out to bid on the 12 acres as a contiguous parcel, 12 and a half. We can definitely vote on that. If we want to do that now, go. Okay, you make that motion.
Okay. I got to look at this now. I move that we move to lease the Bravo parcel as a single parcel, and that we will move forward on the other two items separately.
Okay, so we have a
Seconded by Stan.
hold on. I think what you're saying is you want to move, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you want to move to put the Bravo parcel out to bid as a
Correct.
single parcel.
I move to put the Bravo parcel out to bid as a single parcel.
Okay, there we go.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we've got that out of the way. That's good. Thanks, Tim. Okay, next matter. I heard from my counterparts, and I agree, on the triangle portion, we need to have, as Carl put it, more digestible parcel sizes so that folks like our guests this evening can get a group together and build an association like Ortiz is in the process of doing, like Dennis Giangreco did, of a half dozen or more hangars. I'm going to make a recommendation based on this airport's historical precedent and successes. I'm going to suggest that 2 acres be pared down to 1.5 acres. And there is a reason for that. Mr. Giangreco's parcel is about 1.5 acres, if I'm correct. Mr. Ortiz's parcel is also about 1.5 acres. The parcel that is on the corner there of Charlie near the Jet Ranch, which is currently held by Mr. Gonzalez for hangar development, and we have a party working to possibly take that over and develop it, is also under 2 acres. It's 1.89 acres. So I might lob it out there that we look at 1.5 acres as a minimum threshold. Just a suggestion. Just a suggestion as we move forward in this discussion. Supporting documents required for the bid responses. This has to be discussed. If we're going to bid, we have to discuss it.
Let's do that.
I had come up with this document here that everyone has a copy of. Can I hand this out to you folks in the public? That way you can see what we're talking about. Mr. Lewis, would you like one also? Just simple document. This will give us, when we get bids, basic information. I feel it is imperative when we go to bid on a project, not only do we have this basic information, we have to have elevations and renderings of a proposed project. It can't just be, we're going to lease this land. We have to have an idea what's being done with the land. We have to have some sort of graphic description for us to review as a body, and that would be most appropriate. I can't think of a publicly held body or a privately held body that wouldn't do that. Any comment on that?
I definitely hear you on the sort of size, scale, mass piece. There's always going to be this question as to how much someone's going to realistically invest in engineering and architecturals, graphic renderings, what have you, just on the come. The question I would ask is, in our process, where are the maybe more than one place where these things are reviewed? So what do I mean? If someone came and said, hey, I like the way the airport layout plan looks. You've got some notional hangar sizes and, little yellow blocks on there. That's basically what I want to do. So it gives you a sense, is it 2 buildings? Is it 8 buildings? Is it 100,000 square feet? Is it 200,000 square feet under roof, et cetera, et cetera? Is that one point in the process? And is there then a subsequent point, which is this body approving the details of construction, colors, materials, glazing? How have we historically done that, and where have those checkpoints been?
I'm going to let Councilor Takis address that. However, before we go there, let me just clarify. I'm not proposing that we have a set of fully engineered plans along with every bid. That's completely unrealistic. But I am proposing that along with every bid, we have some idea, some rendering, some floor plans, some elevations. That's not a very expensive investment to make. And I can guarantee you from personal experience that if you went to Reno and tried to build a hangar or develop a facility, they would demand that for consideration.
Completely agreed. And so the words I just wanted to clarify on are the difference between if you went to build a facility versus you went to lease a piece of land. So at what time, at what point in the process is what level of detail required? I think that's just the clarification that I want to make sure we make.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, we have always required that information on every bid that I've been involved with here in the history of the airport. Our standard proposal for bidding states that the bid must be accompanied with, among other things, building material and design specifications for construction, an artist or architect sketch of the construction on site, general appearance and layout, and a variety of other things like compliance with lease terms. We required that. We got that from Carson Air Group before they built their development. We got it from Carson Executive Hangars before they built their development. We got it from Patrick Dang before he defaulted and turned it over to DiLoretto. DiLoretto did that entire area, but DiLoretto hit that market in 2006 when the entire real estate market fell apart and nobody wanted to build hangars. At one point, they had commitments to build, I don't know, like 30 hangars on there. They had commitments from people and deposits. And within a matter of months, everybody pulled their deposits and they had no buyers. They built 4 hangars on that development and they had a heck of a time selling those 4 hangars. The end result of that is then Giangreco came along and said, hey, I'll build out the rest of the project, but I'm a little bit nervous because I don't know how soft or hard the market is. So we gave him a lease that allowed him to back out of part of the lease if he couldn't sell them. And in fact, that is kind of what happened. He built out the first phase of 2 phases, and he decided it was too slow. People weren't bidding on him. He was having trouble selling them. He came back to us to reduce the ground lease rate, which of course is something which is a very low cost part of the whole project. And the airport authority didn't do that. But eventually he did not build out the second phase, which is why the Ortiz brothers are there. The only reason those lots are that small, that acre and a half-ish, is because of people defaulting essentially on their projects. And it was never envisioned by the airport authority would go that route. The philosophy, right or wrong, and you guys get to change it because you guys are in charge, right or wrong, historically has been, we go to the developer who will build an integrated project. We collect rent from one developer, usually a hangar association, because the developer builds it, turns it all over to a hangar association, and then the hangar association gives us the rent check. It makes it a manageable arrangement for the number of staff people that we have on our airport. If you go this other route, and I appreciate that there are other airports, Minden's a good example, where they will lease you one lot and you can build your own hangar, which, from a personal standpoint, that sounds really attractive to me. But from an airport standpoint, that creates a need for manpower and an administrative process to collect rent from a whole bunch of different people. So that is why this airport has historically gone to the development side of things. But that's kind of how we got there. And so I hope I answered your question.
And one quick question of clarification or point of clarification, Steve. When Jet Ranch built their project, did they come before the airport authority with renderings and elevations?
They came with something, and I'd have to go back and pull it. I actually kept all that stuff. I could pull it and provide it to you. They did come with something because Tom Gonzalez had a very, aggressive or however you want to describe it. He had a grandiose plan for a palatial hangar. He had airplanes and antique cars stored all over the place, and he was hoping to consolidate some of them in one place. Steve Lewis worked much closer with him than I was exposed to. He could probably provide you more information. But yeah, we did get it, and he did include the layout of all the hangars he built behind his large hangar.
Yeah, Steve Lewis, I hate to put you on the spot. You don't have to answer this, but weren't you either chair of the airport authority or on the airport authority when that development came through? Yeah, do you recall, were there, yeah, so there were plans that came to the airport authority with the bid.
I was actually the chair of the board.
That's what I recall.
And continually had to recuse myself. We did come with plans, renderings. We did hire a company. Actually, I hired them because I was the project manager to bring that out of the ground.
I'm glad I asked the question.
So, yes, we did come with that. There were changes along the way. Every time Tom came to town, he would spend another $1 million or $2 million. That's why there's a $1.5 million curved roof on it. That wasn't in the original design, but that's what we built.
Thank you so much. So, Carl, that kind of, I think that puts that to rest. We need to have renderings, elevations, and kind of a basic plan as supporting documents with any bid, that we receive.
If I could just make a recommendation, I apologize.
Go ahead.
If I could make a recommendation, I would just recommend that you include the things that are already drafted into the resolution, which is on the next item. It's in just about the second to the last paragraph. It's actually it's really the last paragraph. There's a sentence after that, but include those materials, and then also include the bid proposal or lease proposal form. I think that's what you called that, Mr. Chairman. It's proposal form. And that lease proposal form, it includes some of the information that's already in that paragraph, but it sets it up in a format where you can compare things side by side so that you have an easier way to see, okay, what am I looking at? I've got, 4 different projects. How do they compare? And so my recommendation is you adopt those as the supporting materials.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, you had asked for any other feedback on that form. It looks really good. The only 2 things I don't see on there, one, and for that side-by-side comparison, this would be useful, phasing and timing, if any, right? So is the proposal for multiple phases and for construction? And 2, any proposed commercial use?
Okay, yeah, we should add it. Pretty simple. I have no pride on this. Let's just put it out there,
Council Takis, you talked about managing parcel sizes that you thought were appropriate for the airport to manage. And so what would your recommendation be for a minimum parcel size?
I'm not the right person to make that. I'm just laying it out for you. I mean, if you look at if you look at some of these maps that show different parcel size that have the triangle on it, you will see that at one time there were a bunch of parcels cut up in there. At one point, the airport engineer put together a development plan and laid out the parcels. Those parcels are offset, and they're offset because that was done before we realigned the runway, and that shifted everything. And so, when you look at it, you go, well, wait a second, some of the, these aren't even in the right area. Well, that's part of what happened. And so my own recommendation is when you decide on the criteria, my recommendation is you provide that to our airport manager and have our airport manager come back to you with a drawing that kind of meets those criteria that you could approve as part of the survey for the triangle that could be recorded as a record of survey, and then boom, you've got your parcels all set.
Great, all right, Wes, I love, I heard what you said, and since you didn't set a parcel size, I want to say I'm throwing my hat in with what Chair Golden said. I like that 1.5 acres as a minimum parcel size.
After hearing from Councilor Takis, I was okay going back to 2 acres. I'm on the fence on this one.
Sure. I think that it's a relatively easy process to manage collecting rent from multiple parcels in a computer-enabled world. It doesn't.
Yeah, I think
strike
anything
me as
below
being-
1.5 acres is not going to cut it. That
Right. No, I agree with that.
My 2 cents in this matter is that the reality is gonna be, we're gonna have to parcel it out the way it works best when Corey works with the planners, engineers. And I think that having acre and a half or 2 acre parcels is very appropriate, and there are gonna be some developers gonna wanna buy 10 parcels.
Or they'll
And
want 5 acres.
And there's gonna be another developer that wants an acre and a half. And we just have to make certain that we can accommodate different styles of hangars and access points in that, the way they develop, the way they parcel it out, assuming, your ramp areas, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something that the airport has got to get on. If we vote tonight to go ahead and vote to, which I hope we do, to be willing to parcel out the triangle, that would be the next step, is to bring some reasonable parcel planning into the picture.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yes.
So we can now vote to approve the triangle parcel as multiple parcels, minimum of an acre and a half. Okay, we can get that out of the way. And we talked about supporting documents, and Carl had mentioned the land lease proposal form with the addition of description of any commercial use and phasing, if any. So we'll want to make that change. So maybe we get a motion to go ahead, to adopt that resolution.
Adopt this as well, right?
Yeah.
The resolution, the land lease proposal, and parceling triangle.
That's
Wait,
correct.
the resolution is the next agenda item. Yeah, I mean, if you want to include that language that's at the end of the resolution as part of your supporting documents, that would make sense. But I think it would save the resolution itself for the next agenda item.
Mr. Lewis.
Just a comment to consider. Obviously, the motion to lease out the 12 acres, I think, was a brilliant idea because of the folks on the other side. They're going to be in charge of bringing in all the infrastructure utilities. I know that basically the utilities that we have now in the center triangle are pretty much maxed out. The one that's definitely maxed out is water to supply sufficient fire flow. That one is maxed out. So when you're considering that center triangle and you're going to start dividing this into pieces, just remember another component of that development is infrastructure.
Oh, yeah.
Who's going to be the one that brings it in? Will it be the airport authority and then they charge X amount of dollars as they lease it out? But somebody's going to have to bite that multi-million-dollar bullet in order to start supporting
for
that.
what is needed, that is correct. It's up to
Yeah,
the developer.
I think there probably still will be a larger mover to get the ball rolling for exactly that reason. Now, fortunately, we did at least bring the second piece of water main in a few years back, but you're absolutely right. I think that it's the problem of, the problem is just more exacerbated on the 12 acres. But it's still a big
Question
deal.
to a point of that, Steve, maybe you can confirm this. I noticed on the utility map that the utilities that Jet Ranch brought in comes into the triangle. They actually stubbed, there's a stub into the triangle from the Jet Ranch. What's in that? Are all three in there or just some of the?
No, all of the utilities, gas, water, electric, and communication are stubbed under the taxiway to support the undeveloped acres that Mr. Gonzalez currently controls.
Less than
So
3
we
acres.
did bring in utilities because the brains of the Jet Ranch is in the large hangar supporting all those utilities. So we did stub that out for future development. But I will tell you that
It's
there is
limited.
only sufficient flows to support that acre and a half or 1.8 acres, but that's it.
Maybe some, perhaps electrical and perhaps water or sewer. One of the two could support more than just that, but possibly the limitation could be water. It could be whatever.
The limitation was fire flows is what the
There's
big
the
limitation
There's
is.
the assumption, too, that hangars need water. Hangars don't necessarily need water.
No, unless you have
Unless you
fire
go-
suppression.
Yeah. unless you
Yeah,
go past
exactly.
that.
That's what I was saying is below 5,000 feet, you don't need water.
So there is a possibility to grab a small amount of utilities out of there at a lower cost for some smaller hangar development, possibly. It's just, the stuff that has to be researched.
So, Steve Takis, would it be appropriate at this point to adopt the resolution G4? Is that where we're at here? This is,
I think what, you've already voted to do Bravo as one parcel. I
Yep.
think the next thing is you should take a vote on the minimum size of parcels for the triangle with directions to the airport manager to come back next month with a layout plan.
okay,
That would be my recommendation for the next thing.
okay. Then let's do that. I would suggest well, I'll let you folks suggest.
Is that like a motion?
Yeah.
Move to consider the center triangle master parcel for development in sub-parcels of no less than 1.5 acres?
Yeah, no less than.
1.5 acres, and direct airport staff to, I don't know that a month is sufficient, but airport staff to work with our consultants and in-house to develop a proposed layout map for the center triangle parcels.
And I believe we're going to need an appraisal on that, aren't we?
Oh, we're working on it, aren't we? To answer the appraisal thing, we had it appraised about 9 months ago.
I think
They said that they could give us a revised appraisal for a couple $1,000s or something upon request. Isn't that correct, Corey?
Yeah, and I've actually already requested that.
Okay, good.
So the idea is to hopefully have an appraisal for the next board meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion to put parcels up for lease for bid of no less than 1.5 acres in the triangle. And yes, Paul.
I tend to agree that one of our, as Steve mentioned, one of our greatest challenges is going to be water, power, everything coming into those. So if we put a bid up, is it going to be dry land? Is it going to include electricity? So
Yep,
how
it's
do
gonna be
we
dry. We'll give them the
address-
utility map, and it's up to the developer to bring the utilities to the property.
Okay, so our 1.5 acre guys here is going to have to get his utilities in, I guess.
They'll have to find where the utilities are in relation
Okay,
to
okay.
that and how to bring it in. That's what everyone else has done.
Member Hamilton's question is a really important one, and the good news is I don't think this has to necessarily be tackled tonight, but it's a very important question, which is even if people were willing to spend it, you don't want 15.5 acre parcel people all Wild Westing their own utilities. Now, I assume NV Energy is not going to look at it that way anyway, and they're going to say, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it at X scale, and someone, I don't care who, is going to have to pay that bill. I hope it's that way because, you just don't want everyone putting in only what their project needs. I'm not sure how this is done in big scale. This has been now kind of urban planning and city development, right?
That's why we got to go out to bid for this.
But I think that that's some of what perhaps staff should scratch their heads over and say, how can we start thinking about the right way to do that? Whether it's something that we impose upon a lead developer and give them some consideration, whether it's in the bid process or otherwise, for putting in no less than the infrastructure to support so much, or some other way of handling that. But I think we are going to have to look at that for sure.
Okay,
long as we
let's get
address
back.
that.
Let's get back to the motion. So we have this motion to remind us again, Carl.
Make the motion, Carl.
Make the motion.
Move to lease the center triangle master parcel in subparcels of no less than 1.5 acres each, and direct staff to develop a map, a proposed map for those parcels.
Do we have a second on that?
I second that.
We got 2 seconds. We got a second and a third. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Okay, so the third thing would be to make a motion to include the following supporting documents. And that would be the building material and design specifications for construction. I'm just reading from the last paragraph of the resolution. An artist or architect sketch of construction on site, general appearance and layout, and a statement verifying that all terms set forth in the bid documents are accepted, along with the lease proposal form, which also includes phasing and timing and commercial uses.
I'm looking for this in the resolution, Steve.
It's a very, very end of the resolution. You might be on the back side of the paper. I printed on both sides.
Well, it is printed on both sides.
Are you talking this one, Steve?
Yeah.
This one, the separate?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking at the wrong resolution. Because we're going to need this information also for putting out on Bravo to bid.
Correct. And
Okay.
what I'm going to do is, once you vote on it and decide it, I'm going to edit this document to match whatever you guys decide. But the easy way to do this is just read the language there and then add the lease proposal form and the modifications that Carl
Okay.
had suggested, which are the phasing and timing and commercial use.
Okay.
You want me to give you a sample motion? Would that be easier for you?
I think
Okay.
it would be, but I can, yeah, go ahead.
Suggest that you move to include as supporting materials the building material and design specifications for construction, an artist or architect sketch of the construction on site, general appearance and layout, a statement verifying all terms set forth in the bid documents are accepted or identifying alternative terms and conditions, and the bids must include the lease proposal form, which will be edited to include phasing and timing and commercial use. And someone could just say, so moved, I think. You can.
Hold it. I hate
Okay.
I hate
That's
to screw
right.
this up. Why don't we just adopt the resolution that was put before us?
If you want to adopt, I mean, we can go to the next item and you can include it there. I'm thinking more in terms of, shouldn't you have these documents as your standard?
Yes.
And then you can go and apply them to the triangle and you don't have to go through this process again.
Okay, so does anyone want to move?
So moved.
Okay, second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Now, about the resolution or resolutions. We have a resolution here for receiving sealed bids for property along Bravo.
Correct.
We should adopt that resolution.
That's correct. Now, there are a couple of edits. You know, when I drafted this resolution, I wasn't going to prejudge whether you were going to do it as one parcel or in parcels. So in the area offered for lease in subparagraph A, it should just say that lot located on the airport property instead of or portions of that lot. And so that or portions of the lot should be removed. And then I think Carl had some input on phasing. Which is down at item number 7 at the very bottom of the page.
Thank you. My comment concerned, and you know, remember this resolution as boilerplate, you know, as Council Takis just suggested, may have some things that, you know, that apply, you know, in a very large lot that may not apply in a very small lot, and so forth. But I call attention to item B, number 7, down near the bottom. And one part I spoke to council about already was really just sort of a clarification in the language. So let's start there. When it says, and no more than 1 year's time for construction of each phase, the standard boilerplate lease that has been distributed and that we kind of like because it's DA approved actually says 1 year planning and development and 1 year of construction. So whether we're talking about a phase or an entire project, the model is a year to plan it, a year to build it, okay? And I just call attention to that. Of course, we can change that, but I just wanted to clarify that. I would suggest in the case of the Bravo parcel, having done some analysis on the size of that lot, 12 acres, the I kind of use it as boilerplate or baseline amount of construction to be built on the 12 acres. And what did I use just as a whack at that? Our airport layout plan suggests about 108,000 square feet of hangarage in about 8 different buildings on 12 acres of land. So you think to yourself, what is a reasonable phasing and overall time frame? So how many phases times 2 years, one for planning, one for build? Our comparables in our larger developments are things like Jet Ranch, which is about 4 acres and 80,000 square feet, but really kind of in one big building or 2 buildings. You've got things like the Carson Air Group and things that are more like, 4 buildings and on 3 acres or so. I know those were probably built in one phase. My recommendation here would be to have the minimum for this 12-acre parcel be 4 phases of 2 years for a complete build-out in 8 years, given just the size and number of the buildings involved and the substantial level of infrastructure to be built as well. But that is just my recommendation, opinion. I think that anything, what do you think about when we try to offer these minimum bid terms? You want to hit that nice balance point between keeping people moving, making sure that nobody is trying to move on land for the purpose of just tying it up and banking it, as we heard a comment here tonight. And at the same time, we want to make sure that we have something that at least offers the latitude, given market forces and timing and so forth, to actually be attractive for someone to take down a whole 12 acres and start paying us rent on it. So my recommendation would be for 4 phases of no more than 2 years each.
Hey, Carl.
Add that to the resolution.
Oh, I have a question for you, Carl.
Yeah.
Could you get behind, that's 8 years. That's a long time. Could you get behind 3 phases, 2 years?
The question that I would ask in terms of that, because it's not me that needs to get behind it, and it's what does this group want to do? I think that, where am I coming from? I am, going to say that the party that has expressed interest in actually doing this was probably hoping for more latitude than that. And I said, I don't think you have a chance of getting that, just based on past experience. But at the same time, I think that we really need to look at meaningful phasing, just given the hustle that gets put into any one step is, of course, that they're paying a lease on this whole thing from day one. And the fact that if we stick to our guns and stick to our lease terms and actually do what we say we're going to do, they at least have at risk surrender of all the unbuilt portions should they violate those terms. I don't know if it's about 6 or 8. Remember, what we're setting here is the minimum. Anyone could either bid for a faster time frame or just achieve it faster because it's in their financial interest to do so. I would just advise that we should provide the most latitude possible for a credible project, given that in at least my 45 years or 42 years of living in Carson City, I haven't seen someone come and lease this thing. Okay. So that's all.
I can get behind that. I'm just asking the question.
I can support Carl. This deal with the CTE that was most likely going to go ahead and bid and acquire this Bravo is going to invest such a large amount of money in our airport, whether it comes in 6 years or 8 years. The real financial impact we're going to get is not the lease; it's going to be the property taxes associated with the high-end airplanes and the nicer hangars. So, because of the huge amount of investment that they're planning on doing in the airport, I'm willing to give them a little bit more latitude just to make it easier for them. Just being a developer myself, I'm in the middle of about a $7 million, 80,000 square foot facility I'm doing right now. Everything's taking twice as long and costing 40% more than I expected. So they're going to be dealing with this stuff, and it's not going to be easy, but they can get it done. So I would give them a little bit of leeway just because of that.
All right.
So
anything else then that we want to add to this? So we want to adopt this resolution with the concept of phasing potentially up to 4 phases at 2 years per phase. Okay, we have a minimum rent that's set forth in the resolution. Carl, what was the other revision that we said we were going to do?
Oh, I think it was what Council Takis just said, based on our previous decision, that we're saying the area offered for lease is that lot located as opposed to or portions of the lot.
No, the other piece.
Yeah.
The other piece was that we changed the language to reflect that for each phase, they have a year to get the permits and then a
1 year
year
to
to do
build.
the construction.
It's getting confusing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Carl, make the motion.
Oh, kind of a Mr. Motion tonight.
Can I ask you a question before you make a motion?
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe this language is a little bit confusing because this phasing thing, we hadn't done this before we got to Gian Greco. That was the first lease that we did phasing on. But they're still going to be paying the rent. It's just that they have time to phase the construction. And so maybe we need to tweak
Oh, wow.
that.
I hadn't seen a phase schedule for renting and
Yeah, I know. That-
constructing.
that word
Let's
shouldn't have
not
been in
do
there.
that. Let's,
Yeah.
for permitting and constructing the hangars.
Yeah,
How about that?
good.
Good.
Okay, and then it would change to no more than 4 phases with 1 year to obtain permits and 1 year thereafter to complete construction for each phase. Is that
Whatever
correct?
it says in our lease
So
is
it would
is
say
said well.
bidders may propose a phase schedule for constructing the hangars,
Right.
not renting, constructing.
Yeah.
With no more than 4 phases and no more than 1 year's time for construction, 1 year for planning
Of each phase.
of each phase. Okay.
And I do have one question for council. When you say if phased, the successful bidder must reparcel the phased areas per requirement, what does that mean?
We don't want to end up with someone who's phased it and then they fall out of it and then we have to go through the effort of parceling it.
Gotcha.
And so,
It's sort of like the bond, if you will. You're going to split it up into the pieces, so if we need to take a couple of those pieces, it's easy.
right, and we did the same thing with Gian Greco and it was a good thing we did. I mean, we learned it the hard way with Di Loretto because we hadn't done it. And then we had to pay to parcel off the piece that he walked away from.
Yep.
With Gian Greco, we put this requirement
Yeah,
in,
that's
and then when
great.
Gian
Thank you.
Greco said he didn't want to do the last piece, we required him to.
Yeah, he had to jump through some hoops to do that. Okay,
Great.
so let's then adopt this resolution as revised. Okay, and we can move forward from there.
I assume that Mr. Takis has the revisions written down.
Okay,
Okay.
so the motion then is that I move to adopt the proposed item G4 resolution and notice of invitation to bid on the 12-acre plus or minus Bravo lease parcel with the minimum terms as discussed and amended or edited in the proposed resolution that was provided us tonight,
As modified.
as modified by our discussion and notes tonight.
Okay, do we have,
That motion.
okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, I believe we've knocked out that item. Now. We also have, this is kind of covered some of this. Hold on a second.
Well, while we're doing it, just a quick procedural question. So with the action we've taken tonight, then the wheels go into motion around a publication in our local newspapers, announcements. Does that now, does the staff team take care of that and get that rolling?
Yes, I'm going to make the edits tonight. I'm going to get them to Corey, and Corey can begin that process tomorrow. The dates are set forth in the resolution, and they're designed to give us the adequate time, with a little margin of safety to get them published in the paper and meet the time requirements. Bids will be due on March 1st. A special airport agenda meeting will be on March 3rd. I think that's what it says. And, yeah, March 3rd at the terminal building, where we'll open the bids and award the lease. And there's some additional language in there about oral bidding. The statute says that if you have more than one person bidding for something, then you open it up to oral bidding. You know, you've got two bidders, you say, hey, will you bid more? And they bid back and forth. And we actually have had that happen in the past. It's kind of interesting, you know, until somebody feels too much pain and backs out, and then you take the highest bid. I'm sure it's a little bit like a government contracting when you win the bid, the lowest bid, where you've got the lowest bid. Now you're wondering, can you actually produce at that price? You know.
It looks like we actually just knocked out item number 4. Is that correct?
Correct. That was item number 4.
Okay, because I didn't announce item number 4, but that's all right. So we've gone through our agenda then of action items for this evening, which is good. We covered quite a bit. Airport engineer's report is in your package. I don't think we need to go through that. I hope not.
They may be.
Got to be comatose by now.
Okay. Corey, could we have a brief manager's report from you?
Sure.
Okay.
Getting there.
Okay, you want me to
It's a big
skip?
document.
Let me ask Steve real quick. Steve, do you have a legal counsel report?
Nothing additional to report.
Can we confirm that Armstrong is not on the WebEx? Let's just make sure in case they've been sitting here for 2 hours.
I hope not. I mean, that would be terrible if they were sitting there all this time.
I can get started with the manager's
Go ahead,
report.
please.
So fuel numbers, self-serve, we had no sales with 100 low lead because of the self-serve being down. We had 672 gallons of Jet A. We had a good bit of full service activity. I didn't have the numbers from last year to compare this to. It wasn't in the previous manager's report from last year. So we completed the based aircraft update with the FAA. So we have a total based aircraft of 302.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
And that was developed by comparing the tax assessor's data with previous based aircraft data. And we did have an increase in based aircraft slightly. We completed the test application of the herbicide pre-emergent using the new sprayer that we've acquired. So we have a 500-foot area along Taxiway Alpha that we'll be monitoring over the next 12 months. We've documented the condition, taken photographs, and we'll be comparing that to the rest of the airfield and monitoring for dust and erosion and seeing how that terrain behaves. The signage installation as a part of AIP 32 is complete. That project did require a lot of extra work because there were some delays. I came in over the weekend to make sure that project got done, and they had to do some additional concrete work that was unplanned, and we had to do some change orders to get that done. But ultimately, we finally completed that project. I've taken over the responsibilities of accounts payable and receivable from the treasurer, and I'm working with our CPA and fully utilizing Intuit tools and SharePoint to improve that process moving forward, as stated in the corrective action from the audit. We had some pretty major snow removal. So operations began on Sunday at 6 a.m. on December 26th and pretty much persisted for 3 days. By utilizing the snow and ice control plan and working with Rick and his experience, we ended up with open pavement every single day, even for a short period of time. We did have some open pavement every single day. And we were able to phase opening of the airport. So there were periods of time where we had the runway open with a little bit of taxiway open. But we had a couple of jets come in and out of the airport during that time. So we were able to not fully close the airport, just close portions of pavement to accommodate the traffic. It all worked out really well. Persistence of that snowstorm was difficult. We felt like we were chasing our tails, but I was pretty happy with the outcome overall. According to the ADSB data, we had about 1,235 operations in December, but that data is a little incomplete because our receiver was down at the airport for a period of time in December. I've actually worked with Paul to try to stay better on top of that. He's always monitoring that, so he'll let us know as soon as he notices an issue with that so we can get it going again. And the ADSB charts are also attached. And that's all I've got.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Tim confirmed that our engineer is on the line, so if we could put whoever that is representing Armstrong on, that would be great.
Chris or Nadine, are you still on the line?
Yeah, this is Nadine. I'm here.
Hi, Nadine.
Your turn.
Good evening. So in the interest of time, I'll make this pretty brief. You have the project update list there. The main things are we do have that sign and pavement project closed or nearly closed out. We're just finishing up some paperwork on that to get the grant closed out. And then the AWAS relocation project, pretty much underway. We do have a lot of the documentation that we need moving forward with All Weather, which is the equipment supplier. So they're providing us with some lead times, and I'll get you that finite information once I have a better idea of dates. We do need that special use permit to be submitted to the city to get that ball rolling, because it actually sounds like the equipment doesn't have as long of a lead time as we may have anticipated late last year. So just a note for that. And then as a brief update on the aeronautical survey, the nighttime approach lighting system project, Lean Engineering is, for those of you who did sit in on the update meetings, they're pretty on top of it. They're waiting on an NGS survey approval. They're moving forward with the design on the offset PAPI or the dual PAPI layout, and moving forward with that design. And then as soon as we have that design done, we can move forward to construction. They're a little, I want to say, a little optimistic that the construction will be done by the end of this year, but it's possible. So we have our fingers crossed for that, of course. And then as far as any of the AIP grants, all of our applications were submitted, and I did submit to the FAA the recently signed grant applications. So we're all good to go there. So if there's any questions, feel free.
I think we're good. Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you.
Okay. Treasurer's report. John?
You have the financials in front of you. There's no particular areas of concern. I should mention that the audit, based on the issues that we discussed earlier, cost more than double of what we had budgeted. And that was a shocker. Didn't really appreciate that, but that's the way it worked out. And I wanted to mention that next month we will be presenting the first cut of the fiscal 22-23 budget, which has to be submitted to the state. The preliminary form of that budget has to be submitted to the state by the middle of April. So this body will get two shots at it before we submit it, and the first look will be next month.
Okay. I'm going to use the bully pulpit for this airport authority member section to update everyone on something. Two things. One of them is an airport improvement. There is a webcam that was installed that has full view of the airport at the self-serve. Anyone who's been out there has probably noticed, or may have noticed, I don't know if you've noticed, if you look up, you'll see it. It's an eye in the sky. It works really nice. The problem is we haven't figured out yet, we have it set up on a network, we haven't figured out yet how to link it to our website so that it's available to the public. But it is operational. It actually has exceeded our expectations. So if anyone's interested, I can send me an email. I'll send you the link with the username and password to log in, and you can take a look, play around with it, but you'll see that it has full vantage of the airport in real time. So we see people out at the fuel island and cars moving out on College Parkway and birds flying and things like that. It's unbelievable. The resolution is way beyond what we expected. So it's set up. We have to figure out a way to get it linked to the website. Also, you heard from Corey that there were no avgas sales last month, or nearly no avgas sales last month. We had a customer, fortunately we had the webcam in, who decided that since the circuit breaker was tripping while they were using our system, they were going to have their passenger hold the breaker open while they turned on the pump. It fried out the entire 100 low lead side of the electrical system. The pump, the circuitry, the switches, everything had to be rewired and replaced. We know who did it. They admitted to it. We're going to be sending them a nice, fat, 5-figure bill for the damage. They're lucky they didn't blow themselves up. Unfortunate, but it did happen. But the neat thing is, like I said, if anyone's interested, send me an email. We'll get you a link to the webcam with username and password, and you can look at it. It's pretty cool. Any other airport authority member reports? Yes, Stan.
I was up at the community college about 3 weeks ago for a awards presentation, and Senator Rosen's, one of his staffers, was there. And she said, "You're on the airport board, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, you're about the only airport in Nevada that didn't get any money this year, federal money." And I said, "I don't know what to say." She just said there was a lot of money this year, and for us to. And I told her that you were in communication with the senator, and she said, "Well, I would hope so."
Yeah, we can't get them to open up their coffers to us. I understand. And keep in mind, too, that the monies that were received in this last fiscal year came from requests of the prior year. Yeah. Yeah, it's very disappointing, to say the least. On that note, and thank you, Stan, any agenda items for the next meeting that we need to discuss? John, you've told us about the draft budget, so that's good. I kind of skipped over public comment. I presume we don't have any, but we're happy to hear from members of the public. No? Okay. On that note, it's been a very productive meeting. Thank you. We'll see you next month.